Is the microphone at all picking up the panting of dogs in the background?
No,
Okay.
but we are broadcasting now.
Oh, we are.
Just curious, is the microphone picking up the sound of my dog lapping peanut butter off of my penis?
I'm just curious.
I'm gonna adjust my levels if that's the case.
You can't hear me fapping vigorously with Jergens to this picture of Mai from King of Fighters, can you?
How funny is that? You know what? We'll bring the show in. We'll talk about some stuff. We'll talk about new stuff a little bit before we talk about old stuff.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Because, well, what do you have for new shit to talk about?
Well, I was gonna say we could talk about the announcement of Sexy Terry in the girls
all
fighter.
All the Evo stuff that we just heard about too. Yeah,
and then we could talk about regular Terry showing up in Fighting Layer EX.
Yep, that's Evo stuff. Yeah, cool. Yeah, we should lead with that, and then that'll get us right into the fighting game discussion, go into our arcade stuff and all that.
Well, should I bring it in? Or do you want to bring it in?
Who did it last time?
I think I did, because I was talking and then I was like, and here we are. So
yeah. Yep, you are correct. Okay, well, I'll do it this time then. Is that cool?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
Okay. Hello and welcome back, everybody. It's another edition of the Bare Metal Gaming Podcast. And with your two hosts, me, the whatever fucking, god damn it.
You're terrible at this. What?
No, we're starting over. Fuck that. I'm clipping all of that.
Okay.
Clipping all of it. What was the thing that I fucking used to say? I've done it twice now, I think. Oh yeah, I got it. I fucked up. I realized my mistake now. Okay, here we go. Hello and welcome back, everybody. It's another edition of Bare Metal Gaming Podcast here with your co-host from the best coast, Andrew, joined by the man in the Midwest, Mr. Tim. How's it going, sir?
It's going good. I didn't get a rhyme. Why didn't mine rhyme?
Yours is the man in the Midwest. That doesn't have to rhyme. It sounds cool.
You could have been like, here's my co-host from the no coast.
No, you can't rhyme host and coast and then follow it up with rhyming host and coast again.
Fine.
Yeah, that's some rhyming Homer with Homer shit right there. You can't do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, cool story. Great show, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We were going to talk about fighting game stuff, but I think we're good. You want to go out on a high note.
Yeah, we've reached the pinnacle of what we can offer this week. So
yeah. Like Costanza says, you go out while you're ahead.
Hey, so anyway, this is the follow-up episode to the last episode, which was about
arcade games.
Sorry,
and our love of them.
That was like a weird claptrap laugh. That was.
I hate claptrap.
He's all right. Whatever. I don't know. I love Borderlands. Borderlands has officially wormed its way into my. I'm gonna go ahead and say top. Let's say top 10 video games of all time. Borderlands 2. Yeah, Borderlands 2 specifically, definitely in my top 10 of all time.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool. That's the nice way of saying, like, oh, you have terrible taste.
No. I'm thinking about, as I say, that's cool. I'm like thinking back on this series, and while it's never really like grabbed me in, because I don't know, I tried the first one, and I think what happened, and this is not really the game's fault, but what happened is I came into the game like a week or two after some of my regular friends that I would join up with at the time had gotten it. And I was already out leveled, and it was hard to roll with them.
Oh. And I see. I've never done multiplayer. I've only ever done single player.
Yeah. I think I was just big into multiplayer when that came out, and looking for co-op experiences and stuff. And when it just kind of didn't work out the way I imagined, I dropped it, and then I never really got back into the series. But
you should pick up two. You can play two without having to worry about the first one.
Yeah, I know you can get them on the cheap now too, and they've got the
Handsome collection for the one. Yeah.
Ironically enough, the one that almost gave me or got me back into giving the series a shot again was the shittiest version, the Vita version,
which I talked you out of.
Yes, which you did. Yeah, I heard that was just dog poo, and I was like, well, okay, but wouldn't that be like a great portable series though? Like, I would try it again if they put it out on Switch.
Well, so they released it on. So I have an NVIDIA Shield tablet, and I also have an NVIDIA Shield TV. Can you tell I enjoy NVIDIA products? Um, and they released Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel for that thing. And I was like, oh, this should be good because I mean, from a performance standpoint, I mean, we're talking about like, I mean, essentially, like I think we talked about it previously, but like the Shield hardware is basically the same exact hardware as the Switch. So,
yes.
Mm-hmm. You know, it should be at least a little bit of a bump over like an Xbox 360. Mm-hmm. So I got it and I was like, oh, let's check this out. Like, it's not gonna be as good as the PC because I can play that thing in, you know, full 4K with everything cranked,
right,
with zero problem. But yeah, the Shield versions are poop too. Yeah. So not as bad as the Vita version though. The Vita version's real bad.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. So.
You like your 5 frames a second, kids? Yeah.
Oh, cool. It'd be like playing first-person shooters back in the olden days.
Yeah, just let your Vita die. It's tired. It's old and tired.
It's ready to retire. So yeah, let's talk about some news because I know this episode we're going to follow up, like you said, our discussion last episode we were talking about arcade games and we visited shooters, right? Things like Time Crisis, House of the Dead. We visited racing games, Daytona, Alpine Racer, that kind of thing, and a lot of other things also. The beat 'em up genre, I believe we visited for a little bit, and we put aside fighting games for this episode because we figured we could probably talk the entire time about those.
Yeah, so. as teenagers of the 90s, like that was the genre best represented in the arcade scene.
Yeah,
by far.
Oh yeah, it was huge. Big. It was like the golden age of fighting games for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll get into that discussion, but in related discussion, there's news from Evo, right?
Yeah. Well, really quick, I just want to say one thing because we're recording this on August 10th, 2018. If you're listening to this far in the future, after the society has collapsed, and I just want to say, sex is pretty great, but have you played Doom Eternal?
I've not watched the trailer for it yet. Is it pretty great?
Good. It's pretty great. Yeah, I'm very looking forward to it. Doom 2016 is definitely it's too soon to call, but I can definitely see that ending up on the top 10 list of favorite games of all time someday. Enough time has to have passed, right? Yeah. I kind of look at it like when they're inducting like sports figures into the Hall of Fame or like like bands into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. A certain amount of time has to have passed so that you have the luxury of hindsight, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you got to be able to digest it for a while and look back on it later and be like, you know, it's like listening to Linkin Park now. You're like, oh fuck, now get it away, right?
Yeah,
but, yeah. 15 years ago, it was like, hey, Linkin Park. And now it's like,
15 years ago, I was like, Linkin Park logo on my ass? Let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And now I'm just like, no. Even the new stuff that comes out from them, it's just immediately, nope.
But, so yeah, fighting games, Evo.
Yeah, Evo happened, and some announcements came with it. And, you know, I enjoyed every one of them. But before Evo got started, I think, right? Was the Fatal Cutie announcement before Evo? Or was that on the opening day?
No, that was just before because that game's trash. That game is an anime waifu fighter trash game.
Yeah, which game for our audience?
Oh, what is it called? SNK Heroines?
Right?
Yeah.
And then there's like
version of the old Gallus fighter. Sorry.
That's okay. There's some subtitle. It's like Tag Frenzy or something like that.
SNK Heroines Tag Team Frenzy.
Yes. Okay. So there you go.
Yeah, this game. You know, did you play DOA 2 or 3 or any DOA really, and say to yourself, you know, if only this was trashier and pervier. Well, has SNK got a game for you?
Yeah, and it's coming this year to Switch and PS4.
And arcades and Steam. They did announce it for Steam.
Oh, and wait, arcades? That's a strange announcement.
No, why not? It's on the Netsuka Japanese. Like let's put a box around that. Yes, it's not going to come to American arcades. It's going to definitely be in Japanese arcades.
Okay, but we'll get to it later. There's another series that's coming to American arcades, but we'll cover that later.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, I don't know. This is using the King of Fighters 14 engine. It is an all-female fighter from SNK featuring SNK characters. Up until this or no, it wasn't no, there's still SNK character, but it's a sexy SNK character.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
gender swapped SNK character.
yeah, yeah, and they couldn't just do a gender swap. It had to be a gender swap with sexified.
Right. Big
Anyway,
hoots.
yeah, we're kind of beating around it here. It's so Terry Bogard, the star of Fatal Fury, and also one of the primary characters in King of Fighters. But I would dare say that probably one of the best, most well-known SNK characters.
Yeah, I kind of consider him the SNK mascot.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. So there is a female version of Terry, coming to SNK heroines, and man, is Terry way sexified.
Yeah.
I
like the design, I'll admit. I do like the design.
In the game, it's she's actually credited as Terry Bogard female version.
But they had to point it out, or what?
Yeah, it's I mean, and I remember when you sent me the picture of it, I was like, oh, that's pervy as hell. And I'm like, well, I was like, at least like I guess the cosplay is gonna be accurate now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh yeah, it'll be fantastic. I can't.
But yeah, so it's tough to describe on a podcast. But if anybody's ever seen Terry Bogard, he wears he's got a trucker hat that says Fatal Fury. He's got a long blonde hair, ponytail. He's got a red vest, and he wears a white wife beater underneath it. And then he's got blue jeans on and red sneakers. That's his whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So female Terry wears the same hat. She's got long blonde hair. But she has the red vest, and she has a crop top with her breasts almost entirely hanging out. And instead of blue jeans, and I'm sorry, the vest stops just under her boobs, so her entire midriff's exposed.
Right.
And instead of blue jeans, she's wearing just the most absolutely cut off, so cut off, in fact, that her red underwear are hanging out of them.
Oh shit! I didn't notice that.
Yeah, it's real gross. It's pretty gross. Yeah. So if you ever looked at Terry Bogard and said, "Oh, I just can't jack it to this," man, because I'm not gay. I really would like Terry to be female so that I find them sexually attractive. This is your character.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at the picture now, and the little cutoffs are actually unzipped, and that's also partly why you can see the undies.
And as we all know, when you are battling other people for the destiny of the world, it's important to fight with your shorts completely unbuttoned and unzipped.
Yeah, and I only looked at the trailer once when they announced it. And I remember just thinking initially, like, hey, that's kind of cool, I guess. They want to make an SNK fighter. I think it'd be kind of weird to not have a Terry Bogard in there, so they found a way.
But there's so many good female characters in the SNK roster. It's actually one thing SNK has always been really good about. But I mean, there's like Blue Mary, right? Like literally Terry Bogard's, I guess, like, I don't know, like girlfriend, companion, partner. Like in canon, in game, in storyline, Blue Mary is Terry Bogard's partner. Like,
and she's not in that roster yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So why did we have to do Fatal Cutie, Terry Bogard?
I feel like I've seen Fatal Cutie on a hat before.
Probably. I mean, this is the kind of like complete like objectification anime trash bullshit that is Japan just eats right up and endlessly produces.
Yeah. And you know what? To be completely transparent here, every now and then, like, I get an appetite for some shit like this. You know what I mean?
Like, oh yeah, no. You and I, we've played trashy anime fighters. Like, what's that one we got? The Sega one. I can't remember the name of it. It was so forgettable.
I don't remember a Sega one offhand, but like
you bought it on the Vita. You bought it on the Vita. I bought it on PS4.
Oh yeah. God, what the hell was that thing called? Climax something,
yeah, something fighting Climax.
Dengeki Bunko fighting Climax. Is
that something terrible like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
That, but I mean, Dengeki Bunko fighting Climax? You got it.
That wasn't as waifu trashy though, so much as it was just like super animu.
It had some waifu trash because it had
A
your
little bit.
character that you love from what's that game you love so
Valkyria
much?
Chronicles.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, it had Selvaria Bless in there, and her assist character was the other Valkyria, actually the star of the game,
Yeah.
Alicia, and
And
she's
I
yeah,
her character is disgust like just the grossest like rendition of breasts I'd ever seen in my life.
watermelon breasts. Like, if you've
Oh,
seen the if you've seen the sorceress and Dragon's Crown, like it is just like that. But it's fucked up though, because it's only like that in the like the promo art that you see, right? Or like official art where it's hand drawn Sylvaria Bless. The in-game model of her, they're not quite as ridiculous like that. Like, they're still pretty big, right? Like, there's no getting around that. But I mean, like, they're like straight up udders in some of
it's
the
disgusting.
yeah,
It
yeah,
really
some of the
is
art.
disgusting.
But yeah, this SNK Heroines thing, I go back and forth on whether or not I'm going to give it a try when it comes out. But I honestly, I keep looking at the rest of the year, and there's only a couple more games, or a few, I think, more games that I feel like buying for sure. And honestly, those are probably enough. I'll probably wait and check out Heroines when it goes on super sale down the road.
Yeah, I mean it'll get cheap. And but
Hmm.
the thing is like so what's interesting about this game is that, not a lot of people know this, but way back in the Neo Geo Pocket, SNK put out a all-female fighting game on that, which was really fun, right? But we were talking about like an 8-bit system, so there wasn't a whole lot of perf to it.
Right.
Um, so this
It's more
is
chibi.
actually technically a kind of it's a game in that series, and SNK makes a great game, makes a great fighting game. Like there's just you can't question that.
Yeah.
I'm sure this would be fantastic. I'm sure it's also going to have a lot of cringe.
Yeah,
Uh,
just because it's cringy and pervy doesn't mean it's automatically bad. I mean, like Nitro Plus Blasters, Infinite Heroines Battle, I think or Duel was the name of the game that
yeah,
came out
yeah,
on PS4 that you and I played that I bought. That is like straight up anime waifu trash, 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 but it plays really well, you know?
right, yeah.
So, and this could be more of that. And, sometimes when the mood strikes you, you want to have a laugh while you play your Fightan games, then this will
And
be there for you.
you and I are both we're both on the same page of I will defend Dead or Alive to my dying breath.
Yeah.
The fact it's one of the greatest fighting game series of all time that everyone just loves to point and laugh at because of the ridiculousness of the female characters. But it
Yeah.
is one of the best fighting games ever made.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it has to this day, one of the best boss experiences I've ever seen in a fighting game.
Which one? In two?
So yeah, in two, you fight the last boss, and he literally,
Tengu is the
yeah,
guy's. Yeah.
yeah, he literally changes the season on a whim. So like the background that you're fighting in could be like, springtime or summer or whatever, and then all of a sudden it's fall, and then all of a sudden it's winter, and like it just sweeps over the whole stage. And like I've only seen something like that happen one other time, and that was in Tekken Tag Tournament 2. You go fight Unknown, and the stage changes a lot in between
Yeah.
rounds.
You know,
But
another thing he does, because I've been replaying through that game recently. Another thing he does, so when he gets his first hit on you, the game starts going all blurry, right? Like there's a
yeah,
shader effect that appears on it, it gets all blurry. And the more he beats on you, the blurrier and harder it gets to track what's happening. But if you land one hit on him, it resets everything and all the blurriness goes away. It's kind of a cool thing, right? Like he's just beating the shit out of you, and like
right.
you can't tell what's happening, but yeah, you land that one hit and you get it back. So
Yeah,
it
I'd
kind of
forgotten about that.
yeah. It's a cool trick. It's
It
it's
is, yeah.
it's a good series. I'm actually really looking forward to DOA 6
So am
later
I.
this year or next year, one of the two. I think it's later this year. I think it's around but
No,
actually I don't
it
know
should
if
be
there's been a release
2019.
date. There you
It,
go. Okay.
it should be 2019. I think that's all they've said. I've been kind of watching that since the initial announcement. And I'm a big fan of Dead or Alive 5 Last Round. I think I've talked about this on the show before, but I honestly
I think we
think,
just talked about it last week actually of all things.
yeah, I think Last Round on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, really is up there as a real contender for best fighting game of this gen. I think it's so damn good. There's such an awesome roster and so many great stages and music tracks and features that the game packs. So
and it has Virtua Fighter characters, so there's a plus automatically for Timmy.
Yeah, and Mai. And I know I said this. You're right. We had that same discussion about the VF characters in Mai. Yeah. Okay, moving on.
Moving on. So what was the other announcement for fighting games? A game that you're a big fan of that I think we talked about previously as well.
Yeah, so there were a couple more games to cover, but yeah, I know which one you're hinting at here. And since we're talking about Terry Bogard, Fighting EX Layer is also getting Terry Bogard, but it's getting the Terry Bogard that you are familiar with, the one that you know and love. He'll be making an appearance in the game as a playable character, and they didn't say when. But I know that later this month or early next month, they didn't nail down a specific date. They've got 2 new characters coming to that game. They've got Paul Perna and Volcano Russo or Russo.
Which that's a cool looking character and a very good name.
Yeah, it's a neat name. I'm more excited about Paul Perna coming personally. I liked her from the EX series in the past, and she's a really good stage music. So I'm stoked that she'll be coming around, and for free too. Initially, they were going to charge for those characters, but now they're coming free. And then after they got done telling us that they were coming, they had I forgot what they did exactly, but it was like, something to the tune of like an exclamation point across.
Yeah, it was. What? It was the very last bit of the trailer. Like in the last 2 seconds, they just show Terry Bogard in game.
Yeah, and the announcer goes, Terry Bogard.
Yeah, so Terry Bogard's coming to that male version, male Terry.
Yep.
Is going to be in Fighting Layer, or Fighting EX later, and also it was hinted at. They still don't have a release date, but the game is coming to arcades, as you indicated earlier.
Yeah.
Also, because of that, because it's coming to the Nessica Live, which is the Taito game service in Japan, which is a Windows-based PC. They're also strongly considering a PC version of the game at some point, which that's my jam.
Yeah, that'll make you happy, huh?
It'll actually, I'll get it for that.
That's cool.
I can't be bothered with your paltry 1080p peasant nonsense. What? No.
What'll excite me is if they can manage a physical release over here in the States. I know the game had a disc release in Japan, but Japan only. So maybe they'll, they're supposedly small development house. Maybe they'll team up with Limited Run Games or something like that.
Oh, so everybody can fight over 25 copies. That'd be great.
It'd be a total shit show.
Well, I mean, but PS4 is region free, so if you really wanted it on physical, there it is.
Yeah, I know that's an option. Yeah, I like to get region specific though sometimes when I'm trying to collect stuff. But yeah, if a year from now we still don't have anything, maybe I'll look into it then.
Yeah, or you can fight about it on Limited Run Games.
Right, I just start screaming at Doug and Josh on Twitter. When are you gonna bring that? Announce it already. Yeah,
I'm sure they love hearing that.
Yeah. Hey, can I just say something else too here about fighting games in general right now?
Sure.
I am so excited about all the crossovers that we're getting. I just love it. Like these kinds of things, right? Like Terry Bogard coming to Fighting EX Layer, Tekken 7 already having Akuma and Geese Howard, right? That kind of stuff. We're seeing more and more of that in our fighting games now. The Virtua Fighter characters in DOA that we mentioned, Mai and DOA, right? That stuff would have melted my world in the 90s when I was a kid, right? Like those are the kind of crossover things that you dreamed of.
Well, what an amazing segue into our topic this week, because we will talk about games that premiered that idea.
Yeah, we certainly can. But I love that stuff is getting more common now because I just think it's cool, man. I think it's special when universes collide like that. I've always dug that kind of thing. So just happy to see it. Oh, and the last Evo thing, before I forget, Tekken 7's getting season 2 of DLC. So you've got Anna and Lei Wulong who've been announced, as well as, oddly enough, Negan from The Walking Dead TV show.
I didn't know what to make of that. I was like, that's a little weird. I honestly, I was expecting them to announce Kenny Omega who's a New Japan Pro Wrestling. He's actually the champ right now, the heavyweight champ.
Mm-hmm.
Big Tekken fan, big fighting game fan. I mean, the guy, his moves are called, his finishing move is called the V trigger. He uses it constantly. He starred as Cody in the live action trailer for Cody's addition to Street Fighter V. I was really expecting them to announce him as a playable character, but yeah, Negan, great, cool.
Yeah, like my initial reaction was the Walking Dead TV show is really tired right now. Like,
It's so over with. When the stars, when like the literal star of your show is leaving because he's just like, dude, it's been fucking like 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a little sick of playing Rick Grimes. Like, that's when you're like, okay, maybe we should start packing this in.
Yeah, they diverged a lot from the comics, which isn't a problem, but when you're going to do that, you need to stray from the source material. You got to have superior material to roll with. And,
right.
It's been pretty lackluster. They've been losing viewers and stuff every season pretty consistently for the last at least few seasons now. But,
well, there's only so long you can stretch that out.
Yeah.
The actual zombies aren't a threat anymore.
No. I will say that Negan himself is an interesting character and surely an odd pick for Tekken, but I'll give it a chance. He could be fun if they, like have some fun with the character. Like the idea of him caving in, like Kazuya's head with a baseball bat is kind of upsetting to me. But
yeah, right. But, I mean, like.
But what if they take it the other direction, though? Right? Because on the show, the actor Jeffrey Dean Morgan. He's always leaning and swaying all over the fucking place. The guy never stands up straight for a second.
He's a fantastic actor. Like he's great.
Yeah. But
I just watched the movie Rampage.
Oh boy.
Yeah, that happened. My capsule review is it's a movie. He was the highlight of that film.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He chewed scenery though every time he was on screen. He was the best part of that movie. But
on the show, he leans all over the place. Like I don't know if you watch the show much.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like, just try to imagine a guy like just addressing a room full of people, and he's talking shit about how you better fall in line or listen to his rules because if you don't, you're gonna get a hot iron to the face or whatever the punishment is for disobedience because he's kind of like the mad king of his little society, right? And while he's doing it, he's like literally like bending at the waist and leaning backward or leaning to the side and like it just looks odd. It's like everything he does, it's like part Andrew Dice Clay, part like it's just kind of its own thing.
Little Jack Horner,
right? So they gotta have like a nod to that in the game or I won't be happy. They better have something where he just leans all over the fucking place.
They'll probably do something.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. Yeah, I blew our seg that we had set up. I'm sorry.
That's fair. No, it's fine. It's fine. So yeah, 90s arcade games, just arcade games in general, right? The arcade games we grew up with and our memories around them. And now we wanted to say this because like, as we said earlier, it's like, this is a big part of it. This is a big topic. This was the genre that ruled the day.
Yes.
In the 90s, the fighting game.
Yeah, it sure did, man.
Things kick off with Street Fighter 2 back in 1991. That was kind of the big first one.
Yeah, that made a huge impact on a lot of people, but I wasn't one of those kids.
I was just going to say that. Street Fighter 2 kind of just went past me. It was there. I remember it. I remember people crowding around the machine. And I think you are going to have a similar experience here. The one that got me, the fighting game that finally got me, was the original Mortal Kombat in 1992.
Yes.
Sub-Zero.
Yes, hell yes. Street Fighter 2 existed for me, but I didn't really play that until it came home to the Super Nintendo. And my best friend who lived across the street had that game on Super Nintendo. and I just thought it was weird. Like they called Dalsum Spaghetti Man because his arms were like noodles and shit, right? And I didn't understand that game. I knew that you could throw fireballs, but like the whole quarter circle forward punch thing was like, huh? You know, it took Mortal Kombat coming out, which completely captured my imagination the instant I saw it. And I saw it in arcades for the first time. And if you don't mind, I'm gonna I'm gonna tell a little bit of a story here. If that's
No,
okay.
gosh, please. That's what the point of this is.
Okay. So I was like 12 years old, and I was just getting into cycling. So we were going to this college campus where they were using part of the streets around the campus as a makeshift short criterium course, right? It's about a mile around or whatever. And we were there for that, but it was UW Parkside in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and they had an arcade in like the lower section just below their cafeteria. And my race had come and gone because the kids always went like early in the morning, right? And so my dad was kind of hanging around talking to other people, and I was just looking for something to do, and I stumbled upon the arcade down there, and it was like, you know, finding the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow or something. I was like, oh my god, this is down here, because I love video games already then, right? And there was nobody down there playing anything. It was like me and one other kid. We were the only ones down there, and we discovered the room together. And Mortal Kombat was like immediately in our line of sight, and I'd never seen it before. And it was like it was from another world, man. Like I'd never seen a game with like digitized characters like that before that looked so real.
Yeah.
Uh, it was really loud because they had the volume all the way up. Super violent, right? Like I remember the first time I saw Scorpion throw his spear and it like harpooned Liu Kang, complete with like the oh, you know, and I was just thinking like, holy shit, you know, like, did you just see that? There's like blood and everything, you know.
Games will never look this realistic ever. Like, this is amazing.
Oh, I know. It had such a mystique about it too, because like you know, the longer I sat there and I didn't put quarters in right away because the attract mode had so much cool shit going on to look at, right? Like,
Hold on, I'm gonna stop you right there. I think that's an important thing to note, because I feel this way too. I definitely felt this way when I was younger. We talked about last time, like how you'd only have a couple bucks to spend at the arcade.
Yeah.
But there was also just games could be very intimidating.
Yes.
Like you'd see them and you'd be so intimidated by the game that actually would stop you from putting money in.
Mm-hmm.
And Mortal Kombat was one of those games that was so intimidating because when it came out, it was so new and so crazy looking that you were like, oh God, what's gonna happen, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I've always been the kind of person to lose myself in a video game too, right? So like getting my head torn off or whatever was like something I would take personally. You know what I mean? Yeah, and like you were saying, like the attract mode could just like kind of have this effect on you. And the longer that I was watching it, the more it built up this mystique around the game. Because it was like clear that there was like a, you know, okay, it's a martial arts tournament. There's all these crazy guys, and like clearly, like there's supernatural beings in this thing. So like you got this regular looking guy, Johnny Cage or Liu Kang or whatever, and they're going against these guys who can like make icicles and shit. Like they're gonna be fucking killed, man. You know. And I should also, I'm glad I put this in the notes here. There's no UFC at this time, right? There's no, like, you'd seen like Mike Tyson boxing, you know, Michael Spinks or whatever, but there's no like regular martial arts kind of exposure in the States, at least not to my 11 or 12-year-old ass at the time, right? The closest thing I'd seen to this was something like the movie Bloodsport.
Well, I was just going to say, we should point out really quick, the role of Johnny Cage was originally supposed to be Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and clearly, you know, the game takes a lot of inspiration from that movie and other things like it. But yeah, like it was this idea of like there's a place on Earth where, you know, these things that aren't, you know, nobody knows about because like it's shrouded in secrecy and it's mysterious and all that, and like people go there and they get like their heads torn off and thrown into spike pits and shit, but they do it because there's like some amazing prize at the end, and they're all just, you know, like it it just seemed like larger than life. And I played it and I got my ass kicked, right? I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I think the first time I ever played it, I picked Kano because he kind of looked like the Terminator.
Yeah.
And it's a huge Arnold fan, right? But I didn't know any of the moves or anything. And so, yeah, I got worked and my guy got thrown into the bottom of the pit, too, on top of that. So at least on one of my losses, I think I might have played and kept playing and kept losing, and it progressed to the pit. And when I landed in the bottom of that, it was just like, holy shit. I was so blown away. I told my dad about the game, like the whole drive back home. I don't think I shut up about it. And I don't think my dad believed me. He thought it was just like a kid telling tall tales and like exaggerating stuff. But we went back because this was like a series of races. They had one every week for like 3 weeks in a row. So the following week we went back and it was moved out of the arcade up into the actual cafeteria area itself. So right by the registration table, like just a little bit down from there. So we get there and I'm like, Dad, that is the thing. That's the game right there, you know? Like I was there to play that game more than I was there to race my stupid bike at that point, you know? But yeah, that was my experience getting exposed to Mortal Kombat. It walloped me over the head, man. Like that game was just huge.
You know, it's funny. We got another big point out. Like this was pre-internet era, right? Like consumers didn't have access to wide internet at this point. For by and large, that didn't come till later in the '90s.
Yeah.
So this was one of those games that had a lot of mystique around it, as far as what you could see and what was possible in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember a lot of insane tales being told about like the fatalities and like, what you could see. Like it just all that. I don't have any specific things I can remember, but I just remember there was a ton of just like people just making shit up.
Yeah. That's a trait of the entire series, man. That would be a thing that would it felt like it got bigger with every game up until 3.
Yeah. Yeah, people just like making complete nonsense up. And that's, like fatalities.
Mm-hmm.
Like the first time you saw a fatality, it blew your fucking mind.
Yeah. Oh my God, dude, the screen going dark and that like loud kind of low gong that like, doom, right as it gets ready to happen. It's just like so foreboding. Yeah, man.
Yeah, it's a crazy game. But again, like I played it in arcades, but it was so huge at the time that you'd put because what was it, 1992? So I was about 13 years old. You put money into it, and you promptly get your ass kicked because there was constantly a stream of people wanting to play it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my real time spent with that game was when the Sega Genesis version came out.
Mm-hmm.
I had that. That was the reason I finally bought a Sega Genesis, because I remember it was the summer right before I started high school. And then my wife now feels very old. And I remember that summer I bought a Sega Genesis. I bought a used Sega Genesis at this small little video game shop in a basement, and I bought Mortal Kombat along with it. And Mortal Kombat ruled my summer. And I would play it every single morning before the bus came and all that other fun stuff. And that was good times, man. That was
yeah, it was huge. I did a self promotion here, shameless self promotion. I did a video on my YouTube channel about the Genesis.
Really shameless. It's your podcast. It's your YouTube channel. That's not shameless self promotion.
Okay.
Go watch Andrew's YouTube channel.
Yeah. I've got a video on the Genesis version and the Sega CD version, all in the same video. I play them both in a row.
Sega CD version is better in hindsight, but the load time.
Yeah, and that again, the home version was huge for me. I did get to play it. It came to our arcade in Green Bay. I was living in Green Bay at the time, and the Port Plaza Mall had an arcade called Tilt, and Mortal Kombat showed up there. And not too long after I had seen it in Kenosha, I had came home, was telling my friends about it, and they called bullshit. Nobody believed me. That's the other thing too. Nobody believed me about this game where heads were getting ripped off and people getting impaled, until it came to the arcade. And it was this amazing moment of vindication where my friends were just like, whoa, they couldn't believe that the tall stories that I was telling were true. And it was immensely popular at that arcade. I'd never seen anybody playing it in single player mode. I never got to see what Goro even looked like in the game until it came to the Genesis, because there was just always somebody playing it at the arcade, 2 people going at it. Um, and I like had to play it just to hear the noises and stuff and like feel like I had a shot at like maybe winning a fight or something. But I got my ass kicked. I didn't know any of the moves. I knew Kano's ball move because somebody at the arcade taught it to me, and that was like my one thing that I knew.
That was the funny thing about that culture back then is that you did learn things from magazines long after the fact, or you learned them from word of mouth.
Yeah, yeah, totally. The fatalities were like that too. A lot of that stuff was word of mouth. I remember somebody taught me in the arcade how to do Sub-Zero's head rip fatality, but I didn't play him much in the arcade because I couldn't do his fucking quarter circle forward ice maneuver, like the ice attack. I couldn't do it. I really struggled with arcade sticks until I got older. But yeah, you know, as long as we're talking about Mortal Kombat, if we can keep talking about the sequels that came along.
No, I'm sorry. This is my podcast, and I'm telling you, you can't.
Well, I just mean in case you were thinking of going in like chronological order here, which is
kind
of the way that.
Stick with
Okay. Yeah. So the sequels had like even more and more ridiculous tall tales, and I had a friend through cycling, and he was an adult, like a grown adult, and I know now, and I guess I've known for a long time now that he was full of shit, but he used to tell me these stories about Mortal Kombat 2 specifically. And again, like you were saying, pre-internet, especially for me, right? No way to verify this shit other than like seeing it in the pages of EGM or GamePro or something like that. And the way that these games work, and you could get like a different version of the game that would have different stuff in it. So you might have like, you know, an updated version at one arcade, and then the other arcade could be like a week late or something with their update or something like that. So
yeah,
this dude, and I remember him because he was a really memorable guy. We were friends and stuff. My dad liked him. We would always talk and stuff. So I was really good friends with this guy, but he would tell me these tales about, okay, in Mortal Kombat 2, you got to fight on the stage where Shao Kahn is sitting on the throne, and there's Kano and Sonya chained up. If you do, I forgot what it was that he told me you had to do. You had to do something in particular, and then what would happen is they would break out of their chains in the background.
Yeah. I even heard that story.
Yeah. Yeah, and then they would
did.
jump down and you would fight them, right? And if you could beat them, then they became playable. And yeah, I remember thinking like, oh, dude, I used to play Kano in the first one. I would, and my dad, when he would play against me, he would play Sonya. So it's like, Dad, those are our two characters, And
we gotta break them free, Dad.
Yeah. And there's just all other kinds of wild shit. I think by that time the Ermac stories of the first game were out. So there were, stories about in Mortal Kombat 2 getting to play as Ermac, because there was Reptile, there was Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Yeah, and then there's the Red Ninja Ermac. He's in there.
Smoke was in there too, I believe, wasn't he?
Yeah, he would like poke out from behind the trees in the forest stage.
Along with Jade.
Yeah. So all of the rumors and stuff and the different versions of fatalities and babalities and stuff like that.
Friendships were born directly out of the rumor that there were friendships in the first Mortal Kombat. Like you didn't have to kill him; you can do a different move.
Yeah, and the babalities, while those were real in Mortal Kombat 2, I heard a lot of ridiculous stories about like how you'd wail on the baby after you had transformed them and that kind of stuff. But like, yeah, so not only do you do the fatality, but you turn them into a baby first. So you're like killing a baby when you do it.
So here's a fun one. And you might just talk about like, this was back when a lot of people projected their own imagination on these things, right? It's not like these days where we demand that everything's kind of fed to us.
Right.
I had a friend in high school growing up, Joe, and he would come over to my house, and his parents didn't allow video games in his house. Very weird thing.
Sure.
It was the 90s. And he came over and he was playing Mortal Kombat 1, and it got to the thing where it's like, do a fatality. And he would like walk up to me and if you keep holding forward and press punch, like Sub-Zero he would do like his like backhand hit.
Yeah.
And he'd always be like, oh, I smashed your nose up into your brain. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Punch me, man. Like, that's a regular movie. He's like, no, it said do a fatality. And I smashed your nose up into your brain.
That's great. That's such a kid thing,
Oh,
man.
it's yeah. And we were like 13, 14 at the time, which makes it all the funnier.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love stories like that, man. That reminds me of like after Mortal Kombat came out, like there were stories even about like Street Fighter. Because you would have like all these different goddamn versions of Street Fighter coming out, right?
yeah.
And one of the rumors that I had heard at the time was how like, oh yeah, well they saw how big Mortal Kombat got, so like this new Championship Turbo Edition or whatever, like you can do fatalities in
Yeah.
it. They're like, yeah, M Bison lights you on fire, and it's kind of like when Scorpion does it, but like you don't turn into a pile of hey
Barky dogs.
Wouldn't be a podcast without a barking dog. Ah, good grief. I think I might have somebody at the door. Give me a second.
Sure.
Good grief.
And he's
I'm back. Yeah, yeah, I had FedEx packages, so technically the boys were not wrong. We were being invaded. Luckily, they scared them off, and I don't think they'll be back.
Good.
Yeah.
Goddamn UPS terrorizing our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I know. Total scourge delivering packages like that. So I don't remember where I was. I was talking about just rumors, I think, right? Wasn't it about the Street Fighter thing?
The Street Fighter that M. Bison can set you on fire.
Yeah, yeah. Like M. Bison would light you on fire, and yeah, unlike Scorpion, you don't just turn into a pile of dust; you explode. So it's just like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. Because you didn't know. We're just kids. It's totally believable.
Yeah.
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 But yeah, man, Mortal Kombat. I mean, it just didn't get any bigger than that, and that series will always be near and dear to me.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say really quick with the Street Fighter games is, we laugh about it now. It's easy to look back on it. Like you look at the Street Fighter collection, but there were 6 versions of Street Fighter 2 released in arcades. 6.
That's insane. Over the span of how many years, too?
Yeah, like 91 to 94? 94. Yeah. So you had Street Fighter 2, you had Street Fighter 2 Turbo, you had Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, or 5 versions of it. Then you had Super Street Fighter 2, then you had Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah.
5 versions of one game over the period of 4 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That is insane.
Yeah, I remember there being just a ton of that. Like it just felt like there was one, and I guess this was accurate, but like one at an interval of about every a little bit less than a year, you'd see a new one of those cropping up. Yeah, and it seemed crazy when sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. When they would come to the Super Nintendo, I don't think all 5 of those came to the Super Nintendo. I forgot how many of them actually did.
So the original Turbo, Super, and that was it.
Okay.
So the Genesis got Championship Edition, and Super, and then the 3DO was the only home console for years that got Turbo.
Okay. Yeah. That it still felt like a lot even then too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember with the 3DO, that was like a big coup for them. It was like, yeah, we got Street Fighter 2 Turbo. It's the only place you could play it, and it was true for a long time. It was.
Yeah, and there were people that legitimately bought 3DOs for that game.
Yeah.
So
this actually leads nicely into another topic, which we will dedicate an entire show to this at some point, I'm sure. As long as I'm a co-host on this show, this will be a topic. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Neo Geo.
Oh yeah.
And I know you have one game on here that is specifically Neo Geo, but I definitely want to talk about the impact that a little game called Samurai Showdown had on me.
死ぬことと見つけたり、修羅道とは倒すことと見つけたり、我悪鬼羅刹となり、目の前の敵すべてを切る。
So the Neo Geo cabinets, for anybody who's not familiar, they were very you always knew a Neo Geo cabinet. It was a big, giant red arcade cabinet, and it usually had between 2 to 4 games in it, depending on which kind of cabinet they had. But my local arcade had the 4-game cabinet, and it had a headphone jack on it, a memory card slot on it. If you were some rich kid that had a memory card for the Neo Geo, And there was a lot of games out there. There's like Ninja Combat, Nom 75, a lot of the early Neo Geo games. But the game that really just imprinted itself in my brain, and so much so, so it was Samurai Showdown, and that game imprinted itself in my brain. I was obsessed with that game. I was obsessed with the visuals. I was obsessed with the music, everything about it, the characters. I would draw those characters like crazy. At the time, I was kind of like starting to like actually become like a competent artist. And I remember doing like this beautiful in my memories. I'm sure if I looked at it now, I'd cringe. But it was a fully airbrushed painting of Hanzo Hattori from that game.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And I airbrushed in the color. So I penciled it, then airbrushed it in all the color, and then went through and inked over top of it. So it was like looked like comic book art, but it was airbrush color. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty phenomenal. But I was obsessed with that game. I couldn't wait. Every time I went to the arcade, I would have to put money in and play it. And then the home version finally came out for the Sega Genesis. I bought it. And and then Samurai Showdown 2 came out, and that just took everything to another level. Like that I would say Samurai Showdown was probably, so that was 1993. That was probably the first Neo Geo game to really get critical like mass market appeal, right? Like where everybody kind of had heard of it and kind of had played it. Because the first Fatal Fury came out around the same time as the original Street Fighter 2. And then they kind of just, then Street Fighter, their Fatal Fury 2 came not long afterwards.
Yeah.
Samurai Showdown, I have memories of it. I could be terribly wrong. I've not researched it, but Samurai Showdown seemed like the first game to really like kind of cross the lines, because it was the first time we'd seen like weapons based combat in a fighting game, long before Soul Edge. And it was just absolutely phenomenal to this day. I mean, that's the reason I own a Neo Geo. I have an original MVS cartridge in the box with the serial number, with the marquee, with the little posters and everything that came with it. I have a copy of it. It's just one of those games for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's my memory of it as well, in terms of like the mainstream penetration for Sam Showdown, or Sam Show. The other series where I always remember them being a little overshadowed by like Street Fighter, because they, Mortal Kombat with its digitized characters and stuff look very different from Street Fighter. But when you put Street Fighter next to Fatal Fury, they didn't look all that different, right? They kind of look like they could be the same. And since Street Fighter was the dominant one, everything else, just if you were just an idiot kid, was a knockoff of Street Fighter, But Samurai Showdown was really cool. I remember the first time I saw it, I'd never seen a game have the camera pull back the way it does when you have
the scaling effect.
That was just awesome. And how big some of the characters would get on the screen and stuff too. That was really impressive. And I always wanted to play more of that game, but we had one arcade that had it, and it was kind of on the other side of Green Bay, so we weren't over there very often. And I never had it for any of the home systems or anything. I didn't have a Neo Geo, and like there was only so much money at the time to buy.
You weren't a super rich kid that had a Neo Geo,
right. But like, I don't know if that came to Genesis. I can't remember, but like if it would have.
Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and Sega CD all got Mortal Kombat, or not Mortal Kombat,
Samurai Showdown. Yeah. Okay. I think I was probably just too distracted by Mortal Kombat and other stuff at the time, and that one got away from me. But I do definitely remember seeing that for the first time and being really impressed with it, and thinking like, wow, this is that neat game that. There was like a rich kid. I may have told this story on the show before, but there was a kid that lived down the street that was sort of friends, like frenemies, I guess, with one of my other friends. Like there were these two brothers that lived across the street from me, and I hung out with them all the time. They loved video games. They had more video games than me, but they weren't like super rich or anything. But like this kid down the street that they knew that I didn't know, he apparently had a Neo Geo, and like his parents were maybe super well off. I don't know, but like the other the two brothers that were my friends were constantly bitching about how that kid had the Neo Geo and was super spoiled, and like, you know, it's like, oh, he's your friend, you can go over there and play it if you want, you know.
I think everybody had, because I mean, I grew up in a pretty small town, like by New York standards, and there weren't a lot of kids on the road. I think like there was like all in all, like the kids my age on the road, there was like 5 of us. And I was the nerdy kind of. I read a lot of comic books and sci-fi books and stuff like that, and was kind of quietly into video games. And then there was the jockey kids, and then there was the one kid on the road that was like, he was the doctor's son, and he always had the newest, coolest shit. Like he was the kid that, and you just got me thinking about, like, I think everybody kind of like had that kid in their circle when they were younger.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, he was the first one. He like when we all had Nintendos with like 2 games, this kid had like a Nintendo, and every week he had all the newest games, always.
Right.
And like you'd go in his bedroom and he would show off. Like I mean, I don't know if it's just like a rule, but it seems like every kid that has that shit is also a giant dickhead. And he would just show off his just whole wall of just Nintendo games, and he just had them slotted in so you could find. He was the first kid to have, like, he got a Sega Master System when they came out. He got a Sega Genesis when they came out, and he got a Neo Geo when they came out. And you know, that kind of crazy. Like he was the same kid that's like, yeah, this PC, because we would go over there and play the original Space Quest on his computer, and he'd be like, yeah, this is all right, but I'm gonna ask my dad for an Amiga because I hear those are pretty cool. And then he got an Amiga like not even like a few weeks later.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he always had the most cutting edge shit, but he was a huge dickhead, just a giant fucking asshole. Yeah, so definitely when you said friend of me, I was like, yeah, he was definitely that for me. Like it was very much a, like, you know, I look back on it now and I'm just like, every kid in the neighborhood and friends of friends used this kid for the shit he had.
Oh yeah, totally. That was the case with this other kid too. Like he wasn't my friend, and I never actually went to his house, but I would just hear these stories from the 2 brothers, and then like my best friend who was also friends with these brothers. He had been over there and seen it, and then like one other kid that was kind of like in our group had like seen the Neo Geo too, I guess. But I don't know. Like they all told stories about how the kid was a huge baby and like would, you know, all he had to do was cry and then his parents would give him whatever he wanted, that kind of thing. And like I don't know. I just was never got to know the kid, but yeah, the stories of like what a spoiled little shit he was were just like infamous.
Well, and there were many times, like the kid I grew up with, like he would invite a bunch of the people from school to come over and hang out, and I would be in that group, and he'd always be like, "Oh, check it out! My dad just bought a Laserdisc player," and we'd sit there and watch Laserdisc, and we'd be like, "Whoa, holy shit! That giant silver thing has a movie on it," you know, and like
right,
you know, stuff like that. And it's like I suppose a lot of cool '80s technology that I was exposed to is directly linked to you know, that kid. So thanks, Damien, if you're out there. But anyway, yeah. So Neo Geo, right? So Samurai Shodown was definitely a big one. And you asked in the show notes, which Fatal Fury game did I play? Raiden, Billy Kane, and Terry Joe. That was Fatal Fury 2, or it could have been Fatal Fury Special. Could have been either one.
See, I was trying to find out myself, and I don't think it was Fatal Fury 2 because the character select screen is not how I remember it. But yeah, I remember being at
probably Fatal Fury Special then.
Yeah, this would have been around like maybe 93, 92, 93. Like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat were out, but I was at this arcade. Again, I was somewhere for some bike race. I don't even remember where the hell I was, but we spent the evening. It was me and like a bunch of other kids. We were like there for the evening at this arcade, and the one fighting game that they had was a Neo Geo one, and they had some Fatal Fury game, and that was my first exposure to Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, Joe Hiragashi.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, Higashi.
Yeah. So like those heroes, and then like you know, your heels, your Billy Kane, your Raiden. And I was trying to figure out, like, I remember seeing Raiden for the first time and thinking that he was neat because he's this giant pro wrestler looking dude. And he was like doing the classic heel shit where he blows some kind of like powder out of his hand into the opponent's eyes. And that stuck with me. I was like, wow, that's so cool, you know? But I couldn't figure out what fucking game it was we were playing.
Well, so Raiden and Lazarus, they were in the first Fatal Fury and they were in Fatal Fury 2, but you couldn't play as them. Like Billy Kane, you couldn't play as Billy Kane.
Okay,
he was a boss character. So then they made Fatal Fury Special, and you could play as all of them. So I'm leaning towards Fatal Fury Special.
Yeah, we would have had to have been playing Special then, because we were like definitely using those characters.
Okay, and Special got ported to everything. Like SNES, Genesis, Sega CD, PC. I mean, the PC Engine got a port of Fatal Fury Special.
Oh, yeah, that was fun. You know, like all of my Neo Geo experience growing up as a kid was just like these places where I would play the Neo Geo game because they didn't have Mortal Kombat. Like, and that's not that's no fault of like Neo Geo at all, because those games were great. And
I think it says more about how like important Mortal Kombat was at the time.
Yeah,
it's easily forgotten, but it was such an important game.
It had an absolute stranglehold on me. You know,
on most people. I mean, right game, right place, right time. Like, you know, I don't think that John Tobias and Ed Boon get enough credit for really just nailing it. You know, Midway was like, we need a hit, and they were like, what's cool?
Right.
And Mortal Kombat's what they came up with.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, in a way, I'm glad that these places that I would go to didn't have Mortal Kombat, because if they had, I would have just played that. And I wouldn't have gotten to play, you know, Fatal Fury Special or Aggressors of Dark Combat, or like I played Metal Slug, which I know isn't a fighting game, but like Metal Slug was really cool, and I would have never found that if that same arcade where I had played it the first time had Mortal Kombat to play instead, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, Aggressors of Dark Combat was my other one, and that's one that I did get to play multiple times. But it's such a weird story, and forgive me, I think I can't remember if I've told this.
You told me
on my YouTube channel.
Well, I think you and I have had lots of conversations about Aggressors of Dark Combat.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe this is new to our listeners. I hope it is. I was in cycling, of course, growing up as a kid. That was a huge part of my life. So we would travel all the time for races and stuff, and there was this kind of like camp for kids, like a weekend long thing that we would go to once a year. And it was in Decatur, Illinois. I want to say it was at another school campus or something like that. I can't remember where it was. But the important part of the story here is they had a Neo Geo machine. They had one Neo Geo machine where we were eating dinner every night. So what did they have? They had Aero Fighters 2, I think.
Okay, yep.
Aggressors of Dark Combat, some soccer game that I always skipped over. And I think that was it. I think it had those three. It might have had like Puzzle Bobble or something like that too, or whatever their...
Oh, yeah, Bust a Move. That game was huge.
Yeah, I might have had that. But I love fighting games, and Aggressors of Dark Combat and Aero Fighters 2, which we could talk about more another time. I love that game. I played those two games every time I would go to this camp. And I went to this camp for like 3 years in a row. So while I didn't really get to play those games at home, after the first year I played it, like when you're a kid, the same way that I'd like locked into my memory that Mortal Kombat was at UW Parkside, right? Like I made a note, if I go to this thing next year, go to where we ate dinner and look for that Neo Geo machine. You can play Aggressors of Dark Combat. And that game was cool. It had a really neat attract mode that I liked. It was brief and everything, but like they did this cool thing where the music kind of starts playing and it sounds like it's this grand, almost like symphonic, right? But it's all like chiptune-y stuff. But as it gets going, like it kind of speeds up a little bit. And as it's speeding up, they're doing like these really quick, like little one-off animations or portraits of the characters, and it's like cycling through it like a really fast montage. And then at the end, like this giant fist just comes toward the screen, and then you get the logo. And I must have watched that attract mode thing when I ran out of quarters, like, I don't know how many times. I've lost count, but I was just in love with the look and the sound of that game. And I thought it was cool that I picked Fuma. He was my character that I really liked because he just looked like a, classic kind of like cool ninjutsu looking dude. And every first fight with him is always this guy that wears like the wooden traditional Japanese sandals, and you fight him out in the woods. And Fuma's deal is that he's like a time traveler, and his like time traveling machine has broken down, and he finds himself stranded out in the woods. And this dude out there, for no reason at all, just like assumes that Fuma's there to fight. And so he's like, well, okay, I guess we're fighting. Like, that's the code I live by. If somebody challenges me to a fight, it's on. And it's funny because he sticks by that same dumb code. Even as he's traveling around, he runs into this kid in like the inner city on a basketball court. He's got to be like a 15-year-old kid who's talking shit to Fuma. And he's like, well, forgive me. Like, I think the victory screen is literally him apologizing to the beat up kid with like the swollen face and everything, right? Like Street Fighter-esque. And he's like, forgive me, young man. We're supposed to accept any challenge. But yeah, I always liked that game. And it's like the one game where nobody I ever talked to until I met you ever knew what the fuck game I was talking about. And I was so delighted when you and I were talking about Neo Geo for the first time, and I named that game and you knew it. I was like, oh my God.
Or did we just become best friends?
Yeah, I think we did. But yeah, that's my Neo Geo experience.
We will eventually have a Neo Geo episode, I've no doubt. So
yeah, because I mean, I've played so much more of those over the years since then, and now just definitely have a greater appreciation for that whole ecosystem now. Now that I have the time and resources to play all of that stuff, and there's been so many collections, and it's so much more accessible than it was back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, like, and well, I'll be shocked if you don't get Aggressive Dark Combat on the Switch at some point.
Oh, is it on the Switch?
I would believe it probably will be at some point because there are a mountain of Neo Geo games on the Switch.
Yeah. I keep watching for well, I know it's not Neo Geo. I keep watching for Strikers 1945-3, but they did have Aero Fighters 2 come to Switch, and you better believe I bought that shit right up. I have Aggressors of Dark Combat on PlayStation 4. Actually, it's on this collection that came to PS4. I want to say late last year.
Okay, yeah. Was it
the
80K Tamashi?
Yeah. And it wasn't too expensive either. I want to say it was like maybe $8 or something like that. And you got four games on it.
That was a good port of it because that is a emulation of a PS2 game. That came out on PS2 in Japan, so that's an emulation of the PS2 game. Yeah, no, it's perfectly good.
Yeah, it's a good port. The only bummer is that it's all in Japanese, so you don't get any of the cool English text where Fuma's apologizing to beating up 15-year-olds. So
we just got to get you a Neo Geo. That's all.
Yeah, I covet yours, my good man.
Don't get a Neo Geo. It's a money pit. It's worth it.
Yeah, I know. That's the warning. I like yours though. You have this awesome custom one that you've built that I think just looks cool. It looks cooler than any of the ones that I think that you can go out and buy, and it's not the it's legitimate. It's not the X or whatever that one was that came out.
Handcrafted from a MV1C board, yeah.
With love,
and a lot of time and money. Because Neo Geo's a money pit. Stay away, kids. Okay, so really, hey, we should get moving. We've been talking for a while here, so we should start burning through stuff. So on the Capcom tip of things, so Street Fighter 2 paid the bills for them for a long time, but then they had a little game called X-Men: Children of the Atom, which introduced X-Men and beautiful, super fluid animation.
Yes.
Which then carried into a lot of the fighting games that they did back then. Because then you had Darkstalkers, which had that same kind of thing, and then Marvel Superheroes. And there was that period of time where like Capcom's CPS2 arcade machines, like just, they were always a showpiece. Like any fighting game that came on that system was just amazing. And this was, I would say that Mortal Kombat hype had started to die down by this point because MK3 came out and didn't do so hot.
Right.
And by that time, Capcom had kind of taken over because Street Fighter Alpha had come out. which kind of had that Children of the Atom, Darkstalkers kind of vibe to it. And I remember very distinctly, like, I played Street Fighter. I never saw Street Fighter Alpha 1 in an arcade near me, but my family took a vacation to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and there was a giant arcade. There's tons of giant arcades down there, but there was this one giant arcade that was open air underneath right in the boardwalk. And so, like, one side of it you could walk out into the beach, the other side you would walk down to the main drag. And it was the week that both Street Fighter Alpha 2 and Soul Edge had hit arcades. And I got to see those games as soon as they came out, and it blew my fucking mind.
That's awesome. Yeah.
To this day, Soul Edge is one of my absolute favorite games. Not even fighting games, just favorite games.
Sure. Yeah, I missed out on Soul Edge, but I smile as you say that, though, because I can imagine, was that your first 3D fighter?
Well, no, because by then we'd had Virtua Fighter, we'd had Virtua Fighter 2, we'd had Tekken and Tekken 2.
Okay. So you'd seen all those. Okay.
Yeah, but this was mind-blowing because it was weapons-based combat, which kind of rekindled my Samurai Showdown parts of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, like, I'm always a sucker for a game with absolutely amazing music.
Yeah.
And you'll be hard pressed to find a game with a more impressively orchestrated soundtrack, full orchestral soundtrack, I should say, than Soul Edge. For its time, for 1995 or 96, that game was just jaw-dropping. It didn't look as good as the stuff that Sega was putting out, but it was a better game.
Yeah. That's everything you said about the music. That's how I feel about the Soul Calibur 1 soundtrack.
Yeah, it was the same way, right? So Soul Calibur was the sequel to Soul Edge.
Right.
Same characters, much faster fighting game. Than the original Soul Edge. The original Soul Edge is very, very slow moving. It's almost kind of strategic. It's so slow. You have to play it strategically because of how slow it is. And the game only runs at 30 frames a second, which is very, very weird for a fighting game.
Yeah.
And where Soul Calibur, that runs at a full 60 frames a second.
Yeah. I'll have to talk about Soul Calibur on the on our inevitable Dreamcast episode. But
I'm kind of starting to feel like, do we need to do a part 3 of this freaking show?
Because we're going on so long about this.
I think we're coming up on we'll be like almost, we're at 2 hours now, man.
Oh my gosh, are we really?
Are we? No, maybe not. Maybe
How's that even possible?
My math's way bad. We started at 5 your time, not 5 my time.
Yeah, no, we started at 4 my time. We got a head start. Yeah, and it's like 5:20 now, and I think we probably bullshitted for like 5 minutes or so. So I'm gonna guess we're
doing fine.
Hour and 15 minutes in.
Yeah, we're doing great.
Okay.
So and so this is a good point to hit on the so 3D fighting games kind of came out around, I'm trying to think, Virtua Fighter was 93, I want to say.
Was it that early?
Yeah, the original Virtua Fighter was October 93. Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. And that was on Sega's Model 1 hardware, the same time Virtua Racing, same hardware Virtual Racing ran on. And so the 3D fighting games had taken their hold by that time. And not long after that, I believe it was 94, we got the first Tekken. I'm not mistaken.
In arcades, yeah.
Yeah, December 94. We got the original Tekken running on what we didn't realize at the time, but but Tekken 1 and 2 in the arcades ran on PlayStation hardware.
Sure.
Just straight up PlayStation hardware, no difference.
Yeah.
And then we got Virtua Fighter 2, which, again, you want to hit top 10 list. Virtua Fighter 2 is one of my top 10 games, period. Not even, I've spent so much time playing Virtua Fighter 2 and just waiting and chomping at the bit for the day where we get an arcade perfect version, which we finally did receive on both PS3 and Xbox 360, and playable through the Xbox One.
How sad is it that we had to wait that long?
I know. Well, we had to wait that long for Daytona USA as well.
Yeah,
we had that conversation. But I mean, this was the golden age. Well, golden age in the sense that they were brand new. People were still trying to figure out, like, what is a 3D fighting game? Is it literally a fighting game with 3D graphics?
Right.
no one had really kind of experimented yet with like there was a lot of weird stuff happening. Like you had games like Toshinden on the PlayStation that had 3D movement, and with Tekken you could kind of duck in and out. Soul Edge introduced the same thing where you could kind of sidestep, but Virtua Fighter was the first Virtua Fighter was like it was 3D graphics but no 3D movement.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just want to get in like this was the earliest. I would say the golden age of the 3D fighting game, because every company was making their own 3D game, and every company had their own kind of take on how it should work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was cool, man. Like you saw a lot of cool experimental ideas and stuff and some really worked and some really didn't. And if I'm completely honest here, the original Tekken and Virtua Fighter, those escaped me. I don't remember seeing Tekken until it came to PlayStation. And when Virtua Fighter was in arcades, I think I was all about Primal Rage at the time. I didn't care about Virtua Fighter. Sure. I wouldn't come to appreciate that series until later. But yeah,
well, I would dare say that the rise of the 3D fighting game is part of why Mortal Kombat 3 didn't do as well as it did.
Yeah, I also other factors at play, but yeah, definitely had something to do with it, because there was like this new frontier that came along with 3D gaming in general, right? And fighting games got to enjoy that. They were there for that, and it was kind of like seeing. Maybe this isn't such a great comparison, but like the movie Lawnmower Man, right? Like there was this like idea that virtual reality was where we might all be living one day in our free time or something like that, and these 3D fighting games like Virtua Fighter, like, things like Virtua Cop and stuff like that, like they were kind of like the first glimpse at like, oh yeah, I could see that, this cool new frontier. And I guess, like you said, Toshinden and Tekken and stuff had their different takes on like 3D movement and stuff. Really, I don't feel like a great answer to 3D movement came along until Soul Calibur did the 8-way run thing.
Yeah, that was kind of that was the first time you actually experienced 3D movement.
Yeah,
because it wasn't just a dodge or a sidestep. It was like you literally just walk in circles around your opponent. Yeah,
which was really cool. It was way more than doing like the somersault roll in Toshinden, to get around somebody or that kind of thing. And like, yeah, you change the plane a bit. The fireball that they just threw at you was like now going into the background instead of at you. But I remember seeing like a lot of home ports of things like that I never got to see in arcades. And I bet if I had seen them in arcades, I would have loved them back in the day. But like Bloody Roar, I know that was an arcade game that came home, and I loved it on PlayStation.
So this is actually an area where I did get to play a lot of these games in the arcade.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So like, God, what was it? There was, okay, we'll talk about Air Guys. Like
okay.
3D movement and fighting games. Air Guys, again, really experimental. No one really knew how to do things. Mm-hmm. So Air Guys was a fighting game published by Square, weirdly enough, and developed by Dream Factory, who did the Tobal games on the PlayStation.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the modern precursor to something like Power Stone, or think of like an isometric Smash Brothers kind of game, where you could run around this 3D environment and pick stuff up in the environment to attack your opponent.
Yeah.
And that was when I kind of first played in the arcade, and then later came to the PlayStation. There was there was a Capcom, like one of the first 3D Capcom fighting games, Star Gladiator. That's what it is.
Oh, yes.
I remember playing that in the arcade and being really underwhelmed because I had played Soul Edge first.
Oh, okay.
And then I had played, then I had seen Star Gladiator and was like, oh, this is like sci-fi Soul Edge, but shittier. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that was a game that actually had the ability to sidestep left and right, kind of thing. Well, you could dodge, you couldn't really sidestep.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there was a whole host, and Bloody Roar we're seeing in the arcades as well, and it had an original name it had a different name in the arcades.
Yeah, it
Um,
did. I can't remember what it was. It was something. It wasn't Bloody
I'm a
Roar.
looking. I'm a looking. I'm a looking. Uh, let's see here. Boom.
It was such a good game, though, and I love that game. I still, to this day, will load that up and play it from time to time.
Beasterizer in the arcades.
Oh yeah, how could I forget a name like fucking Beasterizer?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, another one. This is, and granted, Bloody Roar and Rival Schools, those are like later into the 90s and stuff. But again,
I did never see Rival Schools. I never saw Rival Schools in the arcade, but I played the shit out of the PlayStation. I still have my copy for the PlayStation.
Yeah, I got
and I have the Dreamcast version too, and apparently it's like super rare and expensive.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's one of those ones. But had I seen those in the arcade, I bet I would have gotten into those. Those would have had been a thing for me, because in 1995 when Toshinden came out on for the launch of PlayStation, like that captured me every bit as much as Mortal Kombat did.
Oh yeah. You'd never seen that kind of stuff. And like we talked about in the last episode, where it's like the arcades were where you went to see the most cutting edge shit.
Yeah.
That was one of those moments where it was like, oh damn, I'm playing this in my house.
Right. Exactly.
And that was an interesting time, because as I said, a lot of those fighting games ran on PlayStation hardware.
Mm-hmm.
Bloody Roar ran on PlayStation hardware. Air Guys ran on a souped up version of the PlayStation called System 12. So did Soul Calibur. So did Tekken 3. Tekken 1 and 2 were 100% on the PlayStation hardware. Soul Edge was on PlayStation hardware. Star Gladiator was PlayStation hardware.
Mm-hmm.
So to get absolutely, I mean, there was this whole concept of arcade perfect. That was the era where we got better than arcade perfect, where when a game came home, and Namco set this bar, where you didn't just get an arcade perfect port. That was a given. You were on the exact same hardware. So you got a game that was packed full with a ridiculous amount of additional characters, full motion video endings for everybody,
right,
remix soundtracks, all of this stuff. And that was a golden age of that, where we were moving past the idea of like, all right, Mortal Kombat 2 on the Genesis approximated the arcade version, but here I am playing Tekken 2. It is better than the arcade in every conceivable way, because it has like literally double the roster.
Yeah. And Tekken 3 enjoyed a lot of that stuff too. Tekken 3 was like noticeably better than the arcade, and it had you can't really you can't overstate how much of a bonus it was, like how much of a nice feature it was to buy a game and have like two different soundtracks to flip between. Right. Like you could have arcade mode or remixed mode. And like I would play Tekken 3 for hours on end, and then like switch the soundtrack and play for hours more, and just like hear all the different versions of the songs and keep going with it. And it was like, in a way, like getting a different version of the game. It was like buying, Street Fighter 2 and then getting Street Fighter 2 Turbo that came with it, and then flipping between the different versions kind of. And
Tekken 3 gave us Tekken Force, did it not?
Yeah, and you know how I feel about beat 'em ups.
Yeah, and you know how I feel about chicken.
Gotta insert that sound clip. You'd like bust open a trash can or whatever. No, I don't think you would. They would just be laying out there, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, they were just on the ground meat.
Yeah, you would eat the chicken to get health, and it was much like in Final Fight or one of those games. And the narrator, who was always the announcer or whatever for the normal mode in the game, would go chicken, just like that.
It still cracks me up. It's like one of my favorite sounds.
Yeah, I love it. And it's funny. What dorks are we? Because we still reference that.
I still say it in my head when if I'm about to have chicken for dinner, I'll think chicken.
Oh my god! Just in your head, I'm such a dork. I say it out loud.
This is why we're friends.
My wife literally got a rotisserie like about a month ago, and as we get home and we start to open it up so we can carve it up and everything, I like set it on the counter. I'm like, chicken.
It's so perfect. Yeah, see, I do that in my head, because when I say it out loud, Carolyn's like, "What? What are you dumb?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you? Are you stroking out?"
Okay, yeah. So I want to back us up a bit here.
Back us up. Where we going?
We could go two ways here. We could continue talking about 3D and talk about Soul Calibur 2, which I had some great arcade experience with, or I did mention Primal Rage being the reason that I don't think I caught on with Virtua Fighter.
Well, I think we could very easily have a 3D fighting game show down the road. So let's take it back in time. Let's go back to the wonderful world of the digitized fighting game.
So 1994, Primal Rage hit arcades. And, Jurassic Park was in recent memory from movie theaters, and that movie was just huge. So dinosaurs were kind of like hot and trending. Dinosaurs were always cool when I was a kid, right? I would have been 13 or 14 when this game came out in 94. Dinosaurs were still cool, all right? So... being a lover of video games and fighting games, and again, still the time when you'd go to arcades to see like the cool new shit that you couldn't play at home yet. I went to the Tilt Arcade that I mentioned before in Port Plaza Mall, Green Bay, Wisconsin, and they had the deluxe Primal Rage cabinet there. It was like the one where the screen was really big, and then in a separate piece from the screen was like the little standee that had like your sticks and everything on it, right? And it was loud. Like we were just walking by the entrance and we spotted this game with the dinosaurs fighting, and you could hear the boom that it would make when like the characters were jumping or when one would get knocked down and make like that thud. And it immediately grabbed our attention. Cause I think we were going because that mall had a movie theater too. So we were probably going to see a movie or something. And we spotted that game front and center. They, wisely put it out there where people walking by would see it and be like, holy shit. And,
so you know how much of a nerd I am, because I did work in arcades for a while. That was the company that made that cabinet. I know exactly what cabinet you're talking about because it got used for years. It was made by a company called Dynamo that did a lot of arcade cabinets for companies here in the United States. And it had like a pedestal, and then it had the monitor up in the back.
Yeah,
it was L shape, and it had really huge speakers on either side of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the one. Yeah.
That cabinet
they were white.
Yeah, that was the deluxe cabinet that like showpiece games got put in.
Yes, and now I'm so glad you told me that, because now I know to refer to those as Dynamo cabinets from now on.
Yeah. I mean, Dynamo made a lot of cabinets. Like they made the original Neo Geo cabinet. They made stuff like what people call the Big Blue for Capcom.
Oh, okay.
That was them as well.
Okay. So, well, I know to call it the Dynamo Deluxe, right?
Dynamo Deluxe. You got her. Sounds like a thing at Burger King.
Right. The artery clogger. No, but that same cabinet, that Dynamo Deluxe, that would later have like Tekken 3 in it and stuff like that. They would keep that thing around for a while, and every time you would go to the arcade to see like a new important game, it was in that thing. But Primal Rage was in there, and man, did it make an impression. I remember walking up to get a better look at it because it was loud as hell, and it was so cool because like everything about it was different looking from every other fighting game, right? Like Street Fighter was sprites and Mortal Kombat was digitized, and while Primal Rage did have some digitized people in it, the dinosaurs themselves were claymation, and you'd only really previously seen that with like Goro and Mortal Kombat with that stop motion animation. So to have the entire roster be like that, and they really stood out. Like they looked very real for the time. And the animation was really believable, and the sound effects too. And this is where that Dynamo Deluxe cabinet comes into play. A great sounding game can be made so much better with like proper sound in an arcade and good acoustics in there and stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I was just to say, I think it's important to note that this was back at a time where not everybody had, good stereos. Because now it's like people have sound bars. And they sound pretty good. And it's not unheard of to have a subwoofer of some kind. Like in my case, I've got a full home theater set up. But back in the early 90s, you just didn't have that. Like you had your TV speakers. So these games were being they weren't only just louder than what you would have gotten at home, but it was just better sound because you had these beautiful full range speakers and subwoofers and everything else just, emanating out of these cabinets. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, my dad was actually a big audiophile growing up. So we had some, like 3 foot tall box speakers from like Polk Audio and Boston Acoustics. And we had 4 of them. I think 2 of them were Polk and 2 of them were Boston Acoustics. And he loved music. He was like one of the earlier adopters of the CD format and stuff. So we had good sound at home. That wasn't like a thing that was lacking at my place. But like you said, yeah, you go to a friend's house or whatever, and they were just like using the mono speakers coming out of the TV or whatever, right? Even with the sound that I had at my house, like I was still blown away by the way that games would sound at the arcade, because they would just, a lot of times you'd be playing a cartridge game back at home, and like that could be loud, but it didn't have the crisp, sound a lot of the time that you would get in games like Primal Rage, for example. So, they had the, I just want to point out real quick with that game that the sound of, I think Talon has a move. Talon's this little like raptor looking dinosaur, and he's like one of the smaller ones on the roster. Well, he has a move where he jumps onto the head of the other dinosaurs, and he uses his talons, I guess, his big ass claws, to kind of like dig into their skull a little bit. And it sounds like the weight of him is kind of like cracking the neck of the dinosaur that he just jumped up on. And so it makes this really satisfying, like kind of like crunching noise that like sent a shiver down my spine the first time I heard it. It was just like so goddamn cool and kind of brutal, and it sold the move, so to speak. And the game was full of that kind of great sound, right? Like Vertigo had a tail move where it would kind of like turn his tail into a knife, and it would have this great like metal dragging across a surface sound effect, like like a really nice kind of like shring sound. And so stuff like that was it just made a really big impact, along with like great visuals and stuff. It really made the game stand out. And I think unfairly now, we're in the age of YouTubers going back and shitting on old games all the time, and like, was this who thought this was cool? Like there's a ton of that out there, and I think Primal Rage is often a victim of that. But if you lived through it at the time when we did, it was hot shit.
It was. You couldn't get away. I mean, that was what you pointed out in the show notes. It's like this game had toys. It had a huge marketing push. At the time, like it was a big game.
Yeah. It had like a brief comic run. It wasn't Marvel or DC. I don't remember what the off-brand comic publisher was, but yeah, I remember seeing it in comic book stores. It was out there, and it was big and successful. I think I heard a rumor that like it was maybe even going to get a cartoon for a little while too.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know if.
But I remember giant like full page ads in magazines, like because it's important to point out, like not only did this game have like the fatalities of Mortal Kombat, but it also had stuff like the I don't know, I'm not as familiar with the characters as you are, but like the gorilla guy, like he would pee on people and things like that, and it was like it was just like you just didn't see that, it was really weird.
Yeah, it had a crudeness about it with that character in particular. Chaos was the name of that gorilla. He had like a fart maneuver that made like this big green cloud that would stun the other player and set them up for like a combo. And then his fatality was one where he would piss on them, and I think they would turn to like it was like just the bones remaining, right? Like they had an acid bath kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it also had cool hidden stuff in there too, which was, again, kind of leaning into the culture that Mortal Kombat had sort of fostered, where there were rumors about like, oh, what kind of hidden stuff is in there, right? Well, Primal Rage had a volleyball mode in it, where you would I should back up also for a second and add that like you had like little humans running around on the battlefield, right, or on the play field, and they're like worshipers for each of the dinosaurs, right? So you like pick your dinosaur, but you're not just picking your fighter, you're like picking your faction. So you get all these worshippers, and as you conquer the territories that are ruled by the other dinosaurs, you're taking their followers too, right? Like they're now your worshippers. And so during the matches, you'd have these little humans running around, kind of like bowing to you, and occasionally one would run out and sacrifice themselves so that they could be grabbed and eaten for health.
Mm-hmm.
And the volleyball mode was this thing that you would activate by hitting one of the humans, not eating them, but like, just doing a normal strike maneuver or whatever, and they'd kind of fly up into the air, and if the opponent would hit them back to you and then you'd hit them back to them, eventually a volleyball net would pop up and like a scoreboard, and you'd now be playing Primal Rage volleyball with the human as the ball. And like there were just these kind of like dumb, sort of semi-humorous like secrets in the game and stuff. And like I said, it just kind of leaned into that like rumored, kind of like what kind of thing am I going to find in here? Kind of culture that was big at the time.
Yeah, I remember that this was way back in the fight. Like there was the fighting game hint book culture was huge at the time.
Yeah.
Where you'd have like giant catalogs you'd buy like that had like, oh, get all the secrets of MK2, and Primal Rage was another one of those games where it was like, get all the secrets.
Yeah, and all the special moves and stuff, and they would have every move for every character mapped out in those things. Yeah. And also at the time, right, like I mentioned EGM, GamePro, or like all the video game magazines that were big at the time, it was a regular thing to try and put Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or other fighting games on your cover, and Primal Rage was one that was on the cover a lot of times when it was hot, because it was hot shit, and there was rumors too about like, oh, when it comes home it's going to have a secret boss fight that's not in the arcade. And then there were rumors about the second Primal Rage coming out, the sequel that never saw the light of day until years and years later, when Galloping Ghost Arcade would actually get one.
Yeah,
that you can go play now if you want to. But
I have played it. It's not good.
Yeah, it's just one of those cool like historical novelty things that it's really neat that they have it, because they're the only people that have one.
Right.
But yeah, it was a big game, and it came out later on home consoles, and I was really excited and then disappointed when it came out and it wasn't arcade perfect. So.
And that's one thing that baffles me, is that I don't know what hardware it ran on in the arcade. I've been sitting here furiously trying to Google it. But the game was developed by Atari, right?
Yeah.
And at the time, the Jaguar was still kicking. It was at the tail end of its existence.
Yeah, we were supposed to get it on the Jaguar. And as a Jaguar owner, I can't tell you how heartbroken I was that it didn't happen.
Wait, the Jaguar CD got it.
Yeah, later.
But the thing is, like, I don't know, it just seems like a missed opportunity where if Atari had actually been like, okay, maybe we should like use our Jaguar hardware and optimize it for that. That way we can have like the perfect home port on the Jaguar.
Right.
But 'twas not to be, No, the Jaguar actually has one of the lesser ports, I believe.
Yeah, it's not great. I mean, it's okay. It's serviceable and everything. It's better. It's not like the Genesis port or whatever, right? But the characters are too small and stuff, right? It's not what you want. And I think it's just, it's a symptom of who Atari was at the time. They were enjoying some waning success, and they were just terribly mismanaged. And the fact that like nobody has been able to, produce an arcade perfect port because like the code's lost and everything. That's just like, oh yeah, that's Atari from back in that day for you right there.
Yeah. And that was last. I mean, they were only a couple years away from being completely bankrupt and getting sold off.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that was their tail end of everything.
And it's funny, right? Because like they had a hit arcade game, and had toy line and all that other stuff, right? And I know the Jaguar was its own special disaster, and they had all kind of. We'll have to have a Jaguar episode later to get into all that, but yeah, it just goes to show like you can have a really big arcade game that has gets home ported to like everything and was fairly successful and still be headed to ruin.
Yeah, and that game went with it.
Yeah.
And it's one of those games that doesn't get revisited. No,
like
you look at any of the games that we've talked about so far, and they've all had re-releases over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Primal Rage is just a forgotten title. Did it not appear on there was a Midway arcade collection Midway Arcade Treasures 2. Yeah, I just looked it up. It is on there.
Oh, okay.
It's it's just an emulation of the arcade game. So
it's what you'd have on MAME, which isn't.
It's actually it's pretty poor. I have that for my original Xbox, and the emulation is not great.
Oh, okay.
So you're better off with MAME, honestly.
Oh, well, that's super disappointing. Yeah, I don't know. I doubt we'll ever see it, but get a decent release. But that's okay. There's the main version is good enough. Honestly, PlayStation and oddly enough, you left me with a Saturn and a copy of Primal Rage, and the Saturn version is the best home port of Primal Rage.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and I guess they developed the Saturn version first, and then pulled assets from that to port to everything else. So everything's kind of sourced from that Saturn version, I guess.
Oh,
which is weird.
That's interesting. Yeah, certainly, definitely better than that Jaguar version. I don't know if I notice it being. It's been a long time since I played that PlayStation version. I should see if I can find a cheap copy of it, and then I can compare the two side by side sometime. But when I played that Saturn version, it felt like what I remembered, from the PlayStation. Sorry.
Right. No. I was just gonna say I believe the PlayStation and Saturn version run pretty close to each other. I think the difference is that the Saturn actually had all those really terrible FMV intros, and the PlayStation did not.
Oh, okay.
And then there were also sound effects that were on the disc for the PlayStation version, but I think due to lack of memory, they didn't get played in game. Whereas on the Saturn had more sound RAM, just more system RAM in general. So they actually had the room to play them there.
Yeah, okay. That'd be the kind of stuff that I would remember too. Yeah.
Well, you'd be forgiven. I mean, it has been a while.
Yeah.
Let me read right here. Okay, so I've got a Sega Retro has a really good article kind of describing it. So Primal Rage is far closer to its arcade counterpart on the Saturn, but still makes sacrifices to better suit the hardware. Some frames of animation are missing, as are certain sound effects, and the differences in the horizontal screen resolution result in slight changes to sprite sizes. The arcade has an internal resolution of 336 by 240, where the Saturn has to go for 352 by 240.
Oh, yeah, that's barely noticeable, though. Okay, so sorry, I took over this podcast for way too long with Primal Rage.
I was going to keep going. I found an article that actually talks about the difference between Saturn and PlayStation.
Oh, okay. Well, shit, since we're on it.
All right, fine. The Saturn port is nearly the same as the PlayStation port, except that it has some exclusive features. The Saturn has the opening cutscene. It featured not only the opening cutscene, which is also in the PlayStation version, but also extra introductory scenes for each character. The character endings, which were static on PlayStation, replaced with full motion videos. There's an option in the options menu to turn the full motion videos off, which makes it behave like the PlayStation version.
Oh.
Does not display combo names like the PlayStation version does. Has longer loading times than the PlayStation version due to having more frames of animation. But unlike the PlayStation version, it actually plays the music back properly, the same as the arcade, whereas the Saturn version the PlayStation version would skip and then restart at the beginning of a match and that kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, whenever I had to access the disc, it would have to stop the audio to get it.
Sure.
So, and there's a lot of sound effects in the PlayStation version, apparently.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned that. That is a thing that was definite trend in PlayStation ports of fighting games and stuff. You get that when you would play Mortal Kombat 3 as well, I remember. Well, I guess you get the music kind of stops in the arcade version anyway, but I would sometimes get bored and swap in music CDs for my copy of Mortal Kombat 3 while I was playing it, just to hear what does this sound like with some heavy metal in the background. And the music tracks were stopping and starting over again and stuff in between rounds. So I was like, oh.
It's funny, and I just think this goes hand in hand with the times that we're talking about. But we were talking about fighting games in the arcade, and we spent a lot of time talking about the home port versions. But again, it's hard to decouple that, right? Because you went to the arcade, you saw Primal Rage, and you knew that you were going to get home ports at some point. And then it was like the debate was on who was going to get the best port kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. There was that just endless discussion of is the Super Nintendo version going to be censored, or is the Genesis version going to have like some kind of like uncensored version? Because I know like the Chaos guy that I mentioned earlier, that you mentioned his peeing fatality. That I think that was censored on the some of the home versions.
I would believe that, especially Nintendo.
Yeah, I think on that one, he had like some kind of nerfed version of that where he didn't pee, he did something else. I can't remember, but oh, you know what? I think it just came back to me. He had an attack where he would vomit, and it would like shoot out like a fireball projectile. And I think in his Super Nintendo version of the fatality, instead of peeing, he would like do that vomit fireball and then walk off screen, kind of like the Scorpion teleport, and then come out the other side, and then like suck the vomit back into his mouth on the other side. I think
that's even worse.
Yeah, yeah. I think if I'm remembering that right, that's just off the top of my head. I have not Googled that or anything, so I might have that partly wrong, but I'm pretty sure I got that right.
Ugh.
But, yeah.
Available for your home in 1995, only on Nintendo Ultra 64. Killer Instinct.
Okay, so I know that I wanted to ask you if you played Killer Instinct in the arcades when that came out.
So yeah, so the interesting thing with that game, right? I actually played the Super Nintendo version first.
Oh, okay.
Because
that's a good way to do it, because then you'll really be impressed.
Yeah, you're really impressed when you see it. Yeah, because my local arcade, because this was '94 when that game came out, but I think it was '95 when the SNES. Yeah, so it was October of '94 when the arcade version hit, and August of '95 when the Super Nintendo version hit. So the arcade in the town I grew up in, the arcade I saw everything at, didn't have a Killer Instinct machine. So I was kind of off my radar. But my best friend's brother had gotten his first apartment in Syracuse, New York, close to where I lived. And we went to go visit him. And while we were there, we went to the mall, and I saw Killer Instinct in the arcade for the first time. I didn't play it, but I saw it, and I was like, oh my God, that looks amazing. And I just completely randomly, we just happened to catch it on the weekend that Killer Instinct came out for the SNES.
Oh, nice.
So I got Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo the weekend it came out, after seeing it in the arcade, and I played the bejesus out of the SNES version. And sure. I didn't actually revisit the arcade version for quite some time. But yes, it was a pretty significant upgrade over what I was used to.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really impressive game. The first time I saw it, being a huge Mortal Kombat kid and all that, and liking Primal Rage and stuff, and also having transitioned from Super Nintendo to Genesis earlier, and like being a Sega CD fan and stuff, and then I guess by this time I had moved on to Jaguar, but like there was still like some Sega kid in me, right? So like, as a rule, if you're a Sega kid, you got to be a little anti-Nintendo, right?
Right, yeah, you had to.
Yeah. And so when I saw Killer Instinct, it looked so fucking cool in the arcade. And I like looking at it, just kind of like gnashing my teeth a little bit at that Nintendo logo. Like, fuck, this is not going to come to the Jaguar, right? Like, this is not going to come to Genesis or anything like that. This is like Nintendo's thing. And it looks so cool. It looks so good. It had like that really great music playing in the background, that awesome announcer, right? Killer Instinct. And like the really cool cast of characters, that fucking skeleton with a sword, right? And like the lizard guy, the fire guy, the ice guy. Like Orchid was a badass looking lady who could like transform into a tiger or something like that, right? Like it just looked neat. It was another one of those moments where like I saw it in the arcade, and it was like that bigger than life kind of game that had like hit all the right notes, right? Loud, big, great, huge character portraits at the versus screen and stuff. And it did that cool thing too, where you'd select your characters, and when you would go to the versus screen, you'd get like a really brief animation of the characters and then it would like freeze on like the last frame of it or whatever until you went to the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, everything about it was just really cool and really striking. And so,
incredible art direction. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, just awesome art direction.
Because much like like Donkey Kong Country, everybody's like, "Oh my god, the Super Nintendo, that game is so amazing." It's like, well, I mean, it's pre-rendered, right?
Right.
It's not like it's rendering those things in real time, so it's just sprites, nice sprites, no doubt. And Killer Instinct was the same way. It was like the game ran on a hard drive, so it had just piles of space to have these giant sprites available. But that was the last. I think that was like the last big hurrah of 2D games, like really pushing because Capcom went the like route of like we're gonna make stuff look like anime. And Killer Instinct was kind of like and Primal Rage, we're gonna push the realism, whereas Mortal Kombat's like we're digitized things is like look at this CG shit. You need Silicon Graphics workstations to make these things.
Yeah, and you said pushing the realism. The Killer Instinct characters, much like Primal Rage, they look like they could jump off the screen.
Yeah, because they were huge.
Yeah, and they did that awesome scaling effect too. That we mentioned with Samurai Showdown earlier, where the characters get farther apart, the camera pulls back, and it reveals this like giant arena. So yeah, Killer Instinct was really striking, and I never got to play it at home until all these years later when I bought the Xbox One version of Killer Instinct that came with the old arcade games.
Which is sad because, I mean, you got to remember, coming to your home in 1995 only for Nintendo's Ultra 64.
Yeah. Yeah, they cut that small part of that attract mode out of the Xbox release, sadly. I wish they would have left that in there.
Yeah.
It would have been just a hair more authentic. But I wanted to bring that game up though too, because even though I didn't, I played it in arcades a little bit. I was always terrible at it. I remember some dude played Orchid and literally did like an 80-hit combo on me, and I was like mad about it. But
Killer Instinct's famous for being one of the first dial-a-combo games, like literally dial-a-combo. Like if you knew how to chain stuff together, you could crank up those 80-hit combos and exploit that.
And while I didn't understand that, because it was so different from the other fighting games that I was familiar with at the time, I still thought it was really neat, and it like killed me that it like wasn't going to come to any home system that I was going to be able to play it on. So that was like the one that was super impressive that got away,
Yep. Although readily available on Xbox One, as you said.
Yeah.
Highly recommend going and seeking it out.
Yeah, and I should also note, the modern Killer Instinct is just phenomenal. I honestly think it's my favorite fighter of the generation.
Well, I thought you said DOA 5 was.
Oh, I said it's got to be up there. I said it's a contender.
Yeah, but KI definitely. Yeah, I spent a lot of time with KI, the new one.
Yeah, it's so good.
It is so good, and that music.
Oh God! Oh my God, dude! The music sold me on the game.
Good old Mick Gordon, man.
So fucking good, man. When they had the first trailer come out that showed Killer Instinct for the first time, and I think they introduced Jago as the first character, his music with like that Mongolian or Tibetan throat singing, whatever that is, that wherever that hails from, I apologize for not
no it's Tibetan. You're good.
Okay Yeah, the throat singing in the background with the crunching guitars and like really powerful drums and stuff, and then just seeing everything else I love about fighting games, right? Like cool looking characters, bright flashy graphics, and neat sound effects. I like the sound of Jago's voice as he's doing his moves and stuff. Made such a huge impact on me, and that announcer's voice and everything, like coming to Xbox One, I was just like, oh my God, I didn't even have an Xbox One at the time. I had like firmly been placed into the PlayStation 4 camp because all of that debacle about the Xbox One,
that turned me off for years.
Yeah, all of that was just reason to be done with Xbox for the time being. But yeah, years later, and that game came out with like 6 characters at first. 6, and now it's got like I think 31 is the final total.
Yeah, I actually bought it for the PC when the Windows 10 version came out. But now I have it on the Xbox One X as well.
Yeah.
So it's convenience. Actually, I wanted to have access to the KI 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Because on the PC they didn't release those.
Yeah, if you buy, I think the ultimate version of the game on Xbox One X, you'll get
I have the
1 and 2.
Right, I have the definitive edition, is what it's called.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so that's the version of that I bought too. I was waiting. I got my Xbox One for a different game, for Gears of War, but all of a sudden it was good timing because I had just gotten my Xbox, and not that long after they had one of those packages for people like me that at the time like rounded up every character that they had come out. And so I was like, yes, okay, that game looked amazing when I saw the trailer, in 2013. So it's finally mine, and oh man, it's so good.
Yep.
Okay, so back to arcades. Anyway,
right. That's what I'm saying. Like it starts getting put to a point where it's very intertwined with home consoles.
Yeah.
But I mean, the one other thing that I'm not going to really get into it too much, but the one other thing we definitely got in the 90s was because of the success of Street Fighter 2, we got a glut of knockoffs of Street Fighter 2. And more specifically, once Mortal Kombat came into the picture, everybody wanted to have the next Mortal Kombat. Because we have time killers here on the list.
Yes.
From Strata Technologies, who also did Bloodstorm later.
Yep.
So that was a hand-drawn game in the vein of Street Fighter 2, but it had the blood and the gore of Mortal Kombat. And every character had a weapon. It was weapon-based combat, and you can actually slice off arms and legs, and you can get armless victories and legless victories. And then if you knew the super secret special move, you could end the match instantly by cutting off your opponent's head.
Yep.
I remember putting some quarters into that game in the arcades just because that shocking presentation of it, and it had a cool announcer. It was like time killers,
Yeah. It was definitely like a lower tier game.
But, super low tier.
Yeah, and we knew it. You would play it, and it just didn't play. It played clunky compared to like the games we love.
Terribly, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, God help us, man. We couldn't help but put quarters in that thing because you wanted to see the cyberpunk guy cut the head off of like the caveman or whatever.
Yep.
Like you wanted to see that shit, and it was novel enough to draw in some suckers like us and get some quarters and kind of get some notoriety at the time.
Yep.
I remember too. The marquee had some good art direction. I like.
Yeah. No, that was, and there is a home port of that. There is a very, very rare Sega Genesis port of that game.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah.
I think you and I played it when we loaded up the old Genesis.
The old Everdrive.
Yeah, the old Everdrive at your place once. We messed around with that for a little bit. We also played that embarrassing version of Clay Fighter.
Oh yeah. Oh god. Yeah, Clay Fighter just wasn't a good game.
Nah.
That wasn't in the arcades though. But no, there was a lot of games. We had a Power Instinct from Atlas, I believe, was who did that. And that was so much of a ripoff of Street Fighter 2 that Capcom successfully sued them.
Yeah.
But the laughs on them because Power Instinct lived on and has since morphed into a whole series of games. The last one, I believe, was Metro Melee in the series.
Which I love.
Which you love. I forgot I introduced you to that game, and that's some Neo Geo hotness right there. That's a late gen Neo Geo game.
Yeah, and it's so unique. We could talk about that one another time. I think we have on my channel. We have a video that you and I did where we played that one for a little while.
Yeah, we played Neo Geo games. We did. It was the Andrew and Tim's stupid video game show.
Yeah, I believe that's still on my channel. So if you're curious about what Metro Melee looks like and why I love it so much, there you go.
Yeah, that's cool stuff. What was some other kind of like knockoff game?
Survival Arts was one that I played. That was a Mortal Kombat clone.
Yep.
And a shitty one at that. That was one where, again, like Time Killers, you could like kind of end the match in like a dramatic fashion, and it wasn't so much that like you were cutting off limbs or whatever and like having legless victories or whatever. It was more just that like when the enemy would get down in health low enough, I think if I remember this right, just about any move would result in them like being dismembered somehow. And like the screen, you get this cool kind of slowdown effect, and the screen would flash a little bit, and you'd have like some dramatic, highlighting around the characters and stuff as like one dude is getting split at the torso or that kind of thing. But yeah, it controlled like shit. It had a really dumb looking character roster. It was just really generic looking, and I knew at the time that it was like a poor man's Mortal Kombat, but there's always just enough curiosity, like, well, what am I going to see, to kind of get you to put some quarters in. That wasn't one that I saw in a lot of arcades. It was only at the ice arena that we had. I think I went there to watch like a cousin's hockey game or something like that, and that they had like 2 games there, and the other one I don't even remember, but that was there, and I had to try it, so I did.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. Because I remember fighting games being so ubiquitous, like you just couldn't get away from them. Yeah, and everybody wanted a little piece of it. Mm-hmm. But like for the life of me, I can't think of any like great examples outside of what we've already talked about, because a lot of it was so free. But a lot of them, we should point out, a lot of them featured on the Neo Geo hardware, like World Heroes.
Oh yeah,
there was the Power Instinct made its way over the Neo Geo eventually. Fatal Fury was largely a knockoff of Street Fighter 2, no matter what anybody says. If it didn't start the way it ended up that way,
So was World Heroes, honestly.
Oh, yeah. World Heroes is not a good game. It's fine.
I liked it. I actually really liked it. That is one that I kind of forgot to mention this in our Neo Geo talk earlier. But I liked it. I did get to play that multiple times as a kid in the arcade. And I don't know what it was that got me to play it, especially in the midst of like Mortal Kombat Fever or whatever.
Well, it was the same devs as Aggressors of Dark Combat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was 80K. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? You're right, because now, as you say that, I can picture the logo during attract mode.
Well, and didn't the Red Ninja from World Heroes, wasn't he in Aggressors of Dark Combat?
Yes, yeah. Fuma was in both games, although they spelled his name with 2 U's in one and 1 U in the other. So
right.
But he was the same dude. And apparently he's some kind of licensed character from some other property, and I'm just not aware of where he comes from. But
it's so weird.
Yeah. But that game was like, it had Mudman in it, who is supposed to be like some kind of African stereotype. They had a robotic looking version of M. Bison. It was basically M. Bison, but with like go gadget limbs.
Well, he was just a straight up Nazi, because it was fighters from all of history, and that guy was like a straight up, like, he was a Nazi. They got him from Nazi Germany, and he was a cyborg. Yeah,
and he had.
I'm not ashamed to admit I own a few of the World Heroes games for my Neo Geo. I own World Heroes 2 Jet and World Heroes Perfect.
Hey, World Heroes 2 Jet has one of my favorite attract modes.
Totally. I love that attract mode. Yeah, I know it. I told you, like, the games are fine. I wrote them off, when they were newbie, but a lot of that was because the actual fighting system was so simple. Like, it was like, oh, this is Babbit time, Right. But now I've come to appreciate it, where it's like, it's a punch and a kick, and it's just kind of cool to play.
Yeah, I think over the years, as we kind of appreciate, as you kind of gain nostalgia for some of this stuff, and you appreciate games that, you're familiar with, but maybe kind of tended to overlook a little bit in favor of like your favorites back then. You go back now and kind of appreciate more what the game was at the time, and like, how it reminds you of the time now, I guess. And so like World Heroes 2 Jet is definitely in that category for me.
And what makes all those games fun is that, every arcade game we talk about has an attract mode. It has that mode that pulls you in. And the fighting games were really fantastic for that, because you had this roster of characters, so they could do really crazy stuff with it. And Mortal Kombat did the thing where you'd get like a little small full motion video thing of each character along with like their bio. Blew your mind.
It's so cool.
Awesome.
Capcom presents.
Ready? Marvel vs. Capcom 2. New Age of Heroes.
Well,
Okay,
yeah,
so-
I don't know, man. I feel like I'm kind of out of fighting games to talk about unless we start going. I mean, like
I got
we
two
should just-
more.
A lot of it's just going to be a Neo Geo episode for me, but
Sure. Well, I got two more, and they're big ones. So
let's do it.
And I think you'll have something to say about both of them. So that's why I feel like we should cover it and hammer through this here.
I will have things to say about them, but not from an arcade perspective.
Okay, and that's all right because, like you said, a lot of this stuff is like impossible to decouple. So from home versions, but we'll go back farther to Marvel vs. Capcom series. You'd mentioned all of the X-Men and Marvel superheroes and stuff, and like all of that Capcom stuff having that kind of look at the time. I basically stumbled completely by accident on Marvel vs. Capcom 1 in an arcade, and it was one of those ones where you would buy like an actual plastic card that you would swipe at the machine rather than put in tokens.
Oh wow! No, see, I had Marvel vs. I had the first Marvel vs. Capcom in my arcade that I worked at in 99 2000, and 99 2000, yeah, thereabouts. And it was the Japanese cartridge because it was the green CPS2 cartridge. It was in obviously all the languages in Japanese.
Sure.
So I did play the first one in arcades.
Okay. Yeah, that game made an impact, especially for me. I was traveling somewhere again for cycling when I found this. I can't remember what even fucking city I was in, but I went into this place because I knew it was an arcade and I had time to kill, and I had not really played Children of the Atom or Marvel superheroes. Like they just as much as I liked X-Men and stuff when I was a little bit younger than when I found this game, I wasn't like still way into it anymore, right? Like I just wasn't still way into Wolverine and X-Men and stuff. But so I missed those games. But when I saw Marvel vs. Capcom, what I understood there was, okay, Ryu. I know Ryu. I can play this because he's in it. And dude, it's got Strider. Like he looks really cool. Who's this Strider guy? And oh shit, I can also tag up with like Venom. And Venom was like, the anti-heroes were cool, right? Like Venom and Spawn and stuff.
Oh
right? Yeah. So like having that in there was cool. So yeah, the game grabbed me in a way that I guess I don't know. I just must have been distracted with other games for those other Marvel fighters that Capcom was doing. But the first time I accidentally did Ryu's hyper combo, where it's not just a fireball, it's like an entire beam that goes across the whole screen, and like you get like the character portrait that flashes on the screen, and like they do this like wormhole thing with like asteroids floating into the background, or like the whole screen changes, right? And then you have these like tag moves where you get two character portraits and they're both on the screen doing their thing at the same time. Like that was really cool. I hadn't seen that before. So that made a huge impact on me, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is so neat!" I got to play more of this, and I couldn't find it. I went back home after that, and the arcade by me just didn't have it. So later, it would come to Dreamcast, and I would play the shit out of it there. And I was a big fan. And then I don't think it was that long after I got it on the Dreamcast, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 came out in arcades, and I think
running
there was
running on Dreamcast hardware.
Yeah. Yes, you are correct. And I think there was a little bit of a gap between the arcade release and when it came to Dreamcast in the States, because I was going for a little bit of time to an arcade to play it, because I didn't know it was even going to be made or anything, or even that it was a thing. I just stumbled upon it. It was one of those malls again in Appleton that had a movie theater and an arcade in it. And so, going to see a movie like usual, and holy shit, Marvel vs. Capcom, that game that I love, has got another one, and there it is, and I can go play it. And hey, there's Ryu, there's Strider, and I can pick a third guy. So now it's a triple, it's a three-man tag team game, and I just fell in love with it, and I kept going back to play it, and I got the Dreamcast version, and then would later go on to buy my first arcade stick, my first real arcade stick, I should say, of decent quality, the Mass Arcade stick. And,
you had a Mass stick? I didn't know you had a Mass stick.
Yeah, I had one of those Mass sticks.
Damn, son.
Worked on my PlayStation and my Dreamcast. I ordered it that way. So
wow.
And I bought that specifically so that I could get better at Marvel vs. Capcom 2 at home, and then go back to the arcade and challenge people there. And that was the first time outside of Mortal Kombat 1, which I would go to compete against people at the arcade in Mortal Kombat 1 like years later when it wasn't hot anymore, and it would be like, oh, they've still got one of these, and there just so happens to be somebody playing it. I think I can take them, so I would go do it, right? But this was the first time I'd ever really like become highly competitive with a game as it was hot and new and modern, right?
Right.
And yeah, like this was a thing for me. I would go to the arcade like several nights a week to play Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and it was tough because I wasn't as good as a lot of the people who were there often, right? People were playing characters that I wasn't playing. There were Magneto players, there were Spider-Man players, there were Storm players. And, I picked guys that I liked, not guys that like I knew I could, work with the moveset or whatever, right? Like I wanted to play Akuma. I wanted to play Strider. I wanted to play Captain Commando because I liked the noises he would make and stuff, and some of the moves and stuff. And I liked Jin for the same reason. So I'd go to the arcade playing as those guys for a while and struggling, to be competitive enough to win fights and stuff. And then eventually I turned. I got to the point where I was like, God damn it, I want to start winning. So I was reading strategy guides and stuff and tier lists. I can't remember which magazine it was that I bought, but like they had like a full breakdown of all of the characters in Marvel 2 and why, what each one had to offer. And I read that thing like it was the Bible or whatever, right? And I went back and I determined that my new team was going to be the Beam team of Iceman, Cable, and Blackheart.
There you go.
And I would go to the arcade, and it just completely changed the way I played, right? Like I went from an in-your-face player to a range player,
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, those are good turtle characters.
Yeah. And I got good. I was competitive. I was like going to the arcade and I was winning, and it was really cool, And I will always love Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It was another one of those games where there was a cool sense of mystery to it too, because there were so many characters in it. Quite a few of them I wasn't really that familiar with, right? Like on the Capcom side of things, there were these characters that were only in like some Japanese released stuff that I had just no idea who they were. And so, you do the thing where you just kind of like make up some story in your head about who they are, or you imagine what they might be, right?
Yep.
And same thing a little bit on the Marvel side, but less so. But like, people like Shuma Garath, I had no idea who he was, but I think I'd like seen him once in a comic or maybe on the shelf at the comic book store, that kind of thing. But like, yeah, I loved it also for like being able to have these matchups where you would take Wolverine and Captain America and Spider-Man and pit them against like Omega Red and Doctor Doom and, Venom if you wanted to, like just these classic. I know Doctor Doom's a Fantastic Four villain. Please don't write me about it.
I would probably be the one to call you out on that. Yeah.
Right. But I love the idea of all of these crazy mashups. And this goes back to what I said earlier in the show about like the time of like all of these, we have all these great guest crossovers now. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was like the epitome of that for me at the time,
Yeah. No, I know. I feel the same way. What's funny is there's a movie theater not too far from me. It's one of those beautiful Paragon theaters that have like leather recliners and shit.
Oh yeah.
And in their arcade, they have the most haggard version of MVC2 you could imagine. The monitor has just nasty burn in. It's all faded out.
It's got some miles, huh?
Yeah. She's been ridden hard. But I was in there and I was like, oh man, like MVC2. Wow. That's pretty cool. Let that game still out there doing its thing.
Yeah.
18 years later.
At this point too, it's only in that place because somebody working there or possibly the owner has love for that game, and that's why it's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
I
cool.
very much believe that. So anyway, yeah, no, my mains, I always kept Ken in there. I tried to. Like, it depends, right? Like, if I was just playing for funsies, I would do Captain Commando.
Mm-hmm.
I would do Magneto, and I would do Gambit.
Yeah,
because those are just fun characters.
Mm-hmm.
And the Magneto is a holdover from my days of playing Marvel superheroes in the arcade, because I learned how to. There was a guy that came to my arcade all the time, and I always was just amazed watching him play Magneto. because he was just untouchable. And I got him to teach me how to use Magneto, so that was kind of a holdover of that. Although there were enough differences in the MVC in the Marvel vs. Capcom version that kind of changed a lot of the advantages to him. But yeah, so it was Captain Commando, Magneto, and then Gambit. And then if I was in a situation where I was like, okay, I kind of want to actually win, I would swap out Gambit for Ken.
Yeah. Yeah, I like Ken too. He was actually my original team of Akuma, Strider, Captain Commando. It used to be Ken, Strider, and Captain Commando before I switched him out for Akuma.
Yeah, and I got to say, like the Marvel vs. Capcom games, well, even going back to the X-Men versus Street Fighter, the original kind of crossover game.
Yeah.
That was where they really started making some pretty big differences between Ryu and Ken.
Yes.
Where it's like they looked at the same still, and because even going back to like Street Fighter Alpha, they started making differences between the way that they threw their dragon punches and the way their hurricane kicks worked. But this was the first time where they really did just play like completely different characters, where Ken became incredibly aggressive in your face.
Yeah.
Where Ryu was a nicely balanced character, where you had like the super like laser beam Hadouken, ranged weapon, but then you also had like the fucking like 25 hit hurricane kick if you wanted to get in personal.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that Ken and Ryu thing, because I started to notice that too, and it was a surprise when you would discover that they were starting to become different, right? Because I had played enough Street Fighter 2 to like see those guys as the same character in different clothes, basically, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. They didn't even start introducing minor differences between them until you get into Super Street Fighter 2, where Ryu's fireball was a knockdown and Ken's Hadouken set you on fire and was a knockdown.
Yeah. It was. They definitely gave him his own personality over the years, or his own, like, I guess, play style personality over the years. And I honestly would come to prefer him over Ryu eventually.
Oh, yeah, far more aggressive. When it comes to fighting games like that, my preferred style of play is just like hyper aggressive, get in there and just execute as fast as possible so that the person can't react.
Yeah. You would have been a good Marvel Capcom 2 player against me then, because that was what I struggled with at first. Before I formed the Beam team, I would get up against these guys who would play like the Magneto or the Spider-Man, and like they got so good at like doing the super jump, and then they descend on you, and you're trying to pick like what side of you are they going to land on, because you got to know which way to block, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh shit, you blocked the wrong way, because they really, were able to use the character's agility to like quickly switch sides in the fucking air as they were falling down on you, and that shit just got so hard for me to keep track of at first.
Magneto's a son of a bitch because he can fly.
Yes.
So you can turn that on and you can force, and the camera fixes on him.
Yes.
So unless you actually jump up there, and then he's got that shitty move where he does the magnetic grab, where he'll like shoot out the thing of metal and bring you back to him.
Yeah.
So I would always, my favorite thing is I would jump in with a hard kick, and then I would do a crouching medium, which was like this little purple energy ball he tossed on the ground, which is a knockdown move.
Yep.
Right. And then I would draw you back in with the magnetic grab thing where he brought you back. And then depending on the game, so if it was Marvel superheroes, that's where I would do his magnetic tempest, which was like this multi-hit fireball thing that kept smacking you across the screen. Yeah. And then my character would run in. But then in Marvel vs. Capcom 2, they changed it so he didn't have his magnetic. He didn't have that move, but he had the magnetic tempest where he like leaned his head back and like shot metal at you, which was still like, if you nailed it just right, man, you got like a good 15 to 18 hits out of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Magneto was a bitch if you knew how to play him.
Yeah, and he's one of the top tier characters. You see a lot of like the guys who would play that game back when it was lively in the tournament scene, and at Evo and stuff like that. Magneto, definitely one of the commonly picked characters. So.
Yeah, it was tricky. You had to change stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, dude, I don't know. Do you think we got it? Do you think we talked about arcade games? You got one more in you, don't you?
I do. If you got the time,
I got it. Let's do it. Let's do this. This is it. This is the swan song until the next time we decide to talk about fighting games.
Right. Yeah, Soul Calibur 2. We talked about Soul Edge, we talked about Soul Calibur 1, and I didn't get to play those games in arcades. I would play home versions of that stuff later, but Soul Calibur 2, I actually did find as it came out in arcades, and got to play that well before the home versions came out. I was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at one of those Namco-branded arcades called Time Out, again, in a mall, right next to the food court. And I was training for my job at the time, up there at like a different, I was working for like a sporting goods store, and one of our like sister stores was up there, so they sent me up there for a couple of months to train during the week, like Monday through Friday. And I was eating in the food court and spotted the Namco arcade, and then like as I'm like eating my pizza or whatever the hell I was eating in there, I noticed that they've got this big poster hanging from the ceiling that says Soul Calibur 2. I was like, what? Because I was a huge fan of the Dreamcast game, like giant, right? That was my other big game on Dreamcast, in addition to Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Well, I guess Quake 3 also. But like, if there was a holy trinity of Dreamcast games for me, it was, you know, that game was in there. So I finish up my lunch and I go in there and check out Soul Calibur 2, and it looks awesome, right? Luckily, there's like nobody on it at the time because it's business hours, I guess, and I get to play it uninterrupted. Play the arcade mode and stuff, and I just fall in love with it. And since I'm there to train for my job, and I'm just staying at a hotel across the street, like I've got time to kill when, you know, it's time to go home. So I just go to this arcade like every night, and I'm playing Soul Calibur 2. And at night it picks up because everybody's, you know, getting off work, and it gets really competitive, really lively. It's reminding me of, you know, 10 years ago going to the arcade, 10 years ago at the time, because this would have been around 2003 or 2004 maybe.
Sure. Yeah.
Going to the arcade and seeing a big crowd of people around a machine, right? It was a big deal at this arcade. People knew about it and were going there to play competitively, and you know, do the thing where you line up and put your dumb quarter up on the screen as if we could all keep track of whose fucking quarter was what. And you'd have a crack at it. But I had this great cadence because I was lucky enough to be working right there. So on my lunch breaks every day, I would like scarf down my food as quickly as possible and get my ass in there, because they had this awesome conquest mode for single player. So you basically go in there and there would be a war going on with 4 different countries participating. And you'd go in, you'd pick a country that you'd want to align with, and then you'd create a character. And you would save it to that arcade machine and everything, right? So I was a Keyleak player. I would go in there. You get to name your version of Keyleak, so that on the high score screen or whatever, you'd be, you know, Uno El Nino or whatever. And that wasn't my name at the time. I was actually trying to recall my name, but I'm getting lost here, so I'm just gonna skip it and keep going. You'd basically play against CPU characters, and it would learn the way that you played, and then it would like have this ghost version of you that would play other people who would come to play the game later when you weren't around, right? And so like,
okay,
yeah, so they would be on the one of the other 3 countries, and you'd be trying to take over territory, right? Like you would want to win as many matches as you could, and every match that you won, because I think you would do like 8 of them in a session, and then you had to put in more quarters if you wanted to go through another round and conquer more territory. You'd have 8 fights, and you want to get perfects the whole way. And of course, as you progress, like you fight harder and harder ghost versions of people at the arcade. And I would get to know these people through their ghost version, and then like meet the real version later that night, or, you know, some other night in the week. And it was just this really cool kind of experience, because online wasn't like super huge for me yet. Xbox Live, I don't think was, you know, too far underway, if it was even at all. I can't remember exactly when I started.
2003?
Yeah.
Xbox Live would have just launched. Like, it would have just launched.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, online, just, you know, for that kind of a thing, yeah, you know, where you would get to know people and stuff. It was just a really cool, different experience, right? To be going and knowing some like ghost version of a player, and then meet them and you know, get your ass kicked or kick their ass, to see how different they were from the ghost. But they also had this thing at play where not only were you aligning to a country and trying to like take over parts of the map, but you'd be gaining rank inside of your army. And so you'd get like some dumb name, like, you know, Uno, the majestic defender of the Phoenix or whatever, right? Like something like that, and it would reflect your rank appropriately in the title. So you'd start off and it'd just be like, Squire of the Phoenix or something like that, right? It's some low level, obviously, like nobody of the Phoenix kind of thing, and then eventually you're just like, the highest rank you could get, and you would see all that on like the high score screen. So in attract mode, it would show you the different countries and the highest ranking members of each country and stuff like that. You could shift your alignment to a different country, but only after the current war had like ended. So you'd be locked in for a little while, and you'd occasionally go in there after one of the wars had ended and see like, oh, Galahad recruited one of the guys from, over on this other country that, I'd been seeing over on the red side for a while. Now he's yellow, or, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was cool. You really had like a reason to keep going back to that machine. And I was really bummed when the home version didn't have like some kind of online version of that. I was looking for some kind of thing where you could try to emulate that experience a little bit and have like, put yourself out there for other people to kind of meet in that way. But it didn't have that. It didn't even have like 1v1 online play, if I remember correctly. I think it was just a strictly offline game.
Yeah, it was an offline game. Yeah, it's funny because I've never seen Soul Calibur 2 in the arcade. It just didn't exist for me. I bought the home version when it came out. I actually remember I got the GameCube version and the PS2 version.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the GameCube you could play as Link, on the PS2 you could play as Heihachi.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Xbox version, so I'd Spawn.
I have that now. Yeah, good old Spawn.
I think if I can interject for just a second here, I think maybe part of the reason you didn't see it in arcades is because arcades were dying.
Well, the arcade I worked at was long closed by the time Soul Calibur 2 came out.
Sure.
Because I think they shut down officially maybe it was in 2003. I don't know. They were on their way out, right? Because even when I worked there, they were starting to move out the video games and put in redemption games.
Yeah.
And then like the little local arcade, not the one I worked at, but the one I grew up with, because there was at one point there was 2 arcades in the mall. The one I grew up with was long out of business. I think they were officially done by like 2002. So Soul Calibur 2 just wasn't around.
Yeah, I only got to play it too in that mall in Eau Claire, because when I went back home after my training was done, I was just waiting for our arcade to get it in the mall that I worked in. And we never got it. And in fact, it wasn't long after that my arcade actually closed. And the one across town too, where I had been playing Marvel vs. Capcom 2, that also closed a little bit before the one where I worked closed. So we had lost all of our arcades in the town I was living in. So the sweet moment where I got to enjoy Soul Calibur 2 up in Eau Claire, like I was really lucky to be able to have that experience, I guess,
Yeah. Yeah, and this I think this makes a great time to kind of close the show, is like, with talking about the closing the arcades. But it's always it's interesting, like going to Midwest Gaming Classic, things like that. And I have a lot of friends that I have friends that are super into collecting arcade machines and having arcade machines in their houses. But and they're all some of them are like 4, maybe 5 years older than I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like they always everybody kind of loses their mind over, oh shit, it's fucking Pac-Man, and it's like, let's play Pac-Man.
Sure.
And they always get very excited over those, and I'm just like, I couldn't possibly care less of it. And like we kind of covered in the last episode, it's like they're just so primitive. To me, the golden age of the arcade was the 90s fighting game scene.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find that. And it is actually one thing I do enjoy about the Midwest Gaming Classic is, it's one of those places where I can walk up to a Mortal Kombat 2 machine with somebody else playing and actually kind of relive that a little bit,
Yeah.
And it's a good time. And it does make me sad because a lot of these here in Minneapolis, we have a couple of retro arcades that are around. And again, it's like, oh, you can play ancient, like Donkey Kong, like,
right.
Oh, don't you love Digger? Like, I'm like, no, I would much rather have Tekken 2, honestly. But
right,
what are you gonna do? I just feel like this is an era of the arcade that those of us that were there remember very fondly. But in the grand scheme of the nostalgia trip of arcades, I think it's forgotten about.
Yeah. Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people playing stuff on it via emulation for YouTube, and it's great because I like seeing people enjoy that stuff when they're not trying to be snark lords about it and like piss all over stuff. But yeah, we definitely are, I guess a generation that enjoyed something that I don't think is ever going to come back.
Oh yeah, no, that's long gone. It's the just the rate of technology, and I again, it's I think this happened in the 80s, and this definitely happened in the 70s and also the 80s, where it's like the arcades had the cool tech, right? But man, it just seems like the 90s just turned everything up even louder.
Yeah.
Where you had, Sega's, because you think about the ridiculousness of this sentence, that Sega was using military developed Lockheed Martin hardware to power Virtua Fighter games. Like, think about that for a second. And it's like, how weird is that?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what it took to, get in your face and get your attention was that kind of ridiculously overpowered cutting edge experience, And
it made an impression, which is what owners of arcades were looking for. You had to have that thing that you could put near the entrance that would grab somebody's attention and say, like, you've not seen anything like this before. Check this out. Come on in.
Yep. And it makes me happy every single time we get a new Mortal Kombat game. You still get that little bit of, that kind of thing kind of comes back a little bit.
Yeah.
Where everybody gets excited over the new fatalities and, what's going to happen in this game. And so the spirit of a lot of that time is still alive. And the same thing happens with Street Fighter games. They come out and they debut new characters, and it's always really interesting. But yeah, it's not. You don't have to go anywhere anymore, right? You don't have to make You don't have to make a trip. It's like right down to the minute when a new game is coming out, and you have it available to you that minute.
Not only that, but you've probably got it pre-ordered on your fucking console so that there's like literally a countdown timer that you can bring up to see this game unlocks in 18 hours.
Right. You've preloaded it. It's now you're just waiting.
Yeah. There's no more walking past the arcade and like being blindsided by Primal Rage or whatever's there,
Yeah. By the time you've played a game, you've watched every YouTube video. You know everything about it. You've read interviews with the developers, and that's something you just didn't get back then. You didn't get insights from the developers.
No,
you got insights from some rando reviewer in whatever magazine you were reading.
Right.
And the dirty truth of those gaming magazines was there was like 3 people working in every magazine, but they all pretended to be like 17 editors.
EGM at one point did have a pretty good, healthy roster of people working there, but in their earlier days, like you can listen to. I know the guys on the Player One podcast will mention this kind of stuff, but Ed, the editor in chief in the earlier days, would just
Ed Semrad,
yeah. He would just make shit up, or he would encourage them to make things up, and so like who knows what kind of thing you might have read back then that was just like, I don't know, just whatever. We got some promotional thing that was in all Japanese text, so we're just going to look at a few pictures and draw some conclusions, and that's and now it's so different. You have such access to everything now. It's everybody's just desperate to get like a moment in the sun for their game that's coming out,
right. Here's the texture artist for Assassin's Creed 7000 and he did the level with the sand.
And he's going to tell you about why Altair is back and better than ever.
And he's also he'll be laid off in 3 months when this game doesn't possibly sell as many copies as we think it will.
Yeah, because we had a ridiculous goal of like 9 million copies for this game.
Yeah, gaming's weird, man. You think about it. You go back, you look at a title like Mortal Kombat. That game launched an empire and was made by like 3 to 4 yahoos in an office in Chicago.
Yeah.
Selling and selling arcade cabinets of it for $4,500 a crack.
I know. How crazy, man, to be those guys, like to have like seen all that from their perspective at the time, man. What a time to be alive.
That's what's crazy about it. Is like video games used to be it didn't used to be such a production, where you had entire companies banking on, if this game doesn't do well, we're going to lose the farm. Like, I'm sure that happened, but
right.
3 people can build a media empire. You don't really see that anymore.
No, you mentioned Assassin's Creed. I think the last time I checked in on one of those, not bought it, I just mean like kind of paid attention to what I was hearing about the development. I want to say that I had heard that the development team was like 300 people or something like that.
I've no doubt. Modern software is just so complex, and it'd be impossible to do that with a small team.
It's honestly a miracle that games even get made. You know what I mean?
As someone who works in software during the day, yes, it's a miracle anything comes out and isn't just a steaming pile.
It's incredible, really. And we have so many like amazing games that come out now, and to just know that like you've got an octopus with 300 limbs managing to juggle, and produce some of the magic that we get to enjoy now. And it's really a shame, this will be another show, I guess, or maybe not, because who the fuck wants to linger on this discussion?
Where we talk like a couple of old men.
No, I was just going to say, because gamers are, it's a shame because you have these huge teams, right? And they put out a game and it's great, but then you have such a shitty, lousy culture of like asshole losers who are your customer base, who will like, and I know it's not everybody, because I'm speaking about you and I'm speaking about me as well as our listeners, right? But I know it's not all of us, but like there's so much negativity and like shitty attitudes toward, like video gaming in general, and people just like get hung up on dumb shit and forget how to just like enjoy a fucking video game. You know what I mean?
Well, you see that in all facets of fandom now. But this actually would make a good episode topic someday,
I suppose. Yeah.
Well, we should close this out.
Yeah, we should. Why don't you tell them where they can find your stuff?
All right. So the easiest place to find me is on both Twitter and Instagram. You can just look me up. It's at Tim Wilsie, Wilsie. You can catch up on what I'm doing, like drawing comics and stuff like that. And that's pretty much it. I don't have like a cool YouTube channel.
Well, all I've got is a cool YouTube channel that nobody watches. So, and it's not even that cool. My mom says it's cool. But yeah,
my mom says I'm the most handsome boy at school.
Yeah. You can find me there at YouTube under Uno Il Nino. That's UNOILLNINO. And I don't know, maybe I really need to look into whether or not I can change that. But that's where you can find me now. And I've got videos on some of the stuff we've talked about today, or home versions, certainly. Like I said, Mortal Kombat, I think I dropped earlier. But yeah, come and check out what I'm doing there if you want to, if you care for some nostalgia. But otherwise, yeah, I guess that's probably going to be it for this episode of the show. We'll be back next time with more stuff. I don't know what we kind of had this one predetermined before we, this topic rather, for these shows. I don't know what we'll do next time, but
I'm sure we'll think of something. We're pretty good about that.
Yeah, we'll make sure it's interesting, or not, or it'll suck. I don't know.
Hey, it doesn't have to be interesting. Don't put that kind of pressure on us.
Right. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.